You all set? Yeah. Yeah. We're good.
All right, now I'm going to be singing that song in my head.
Ready? So you need to take a minute?
I had a pen here, it's gone. You may grab with it? No. Yeah.
All right. It is about 7:03, and I'm going to call the meeting to order. Can I have an acceptance of the agenda?
So moved.
Second.
Second?
By Ms. Curran. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. It is unanimous. Okay. So we've got a kind of a short agenda, but some big topics. We're going to start with walk-ins. Are there any walk-ins this evening? Okay. Cruising right along. Report of the town administrator.
I'm going to slow down because we got a lot today. The field update, still on time and on budget. We're going to see a lot pop the next week, but we are on time to be ready for the football game on Thanksgiving against Hingham. The visitors bleachers installation started today. The 10 and 12 row units for the home side will be delivered on Thursday, and they'll start that installation. And the press box is currently scheduled for delivery next Wednesday. The track installation is ongoing. The weather is obviously impacting the track surface, so that'll be delayed for a little bit. The fencing is going in. The restroom concession building foundation work is scheduled for early next week. The transformer pad is scheduled for tomorrow, and then the electrical installation to all those poles will commence. And the school board is scheduled for delivery the week of 11/11. So the field will be ready right now for Thanksgiving. It will not be done. I know some people think it's going to be open and done. We will open it for Thanksgiving. We will play the game, and then the site will be returned to the contractor. Okay? There'll be some finished stuff that still needs to be done that we're not going to put in because we still have construction equipment going in there. Concession stand needs to be done, so this is a Thanksgiving game, open, and then closed again. Because we've already had some groups requesting to use it after the Thanksgiving Day game, but it will not be available. But it will be ready, and we will be playing Thanksgiving on that field.
Jim, is there going to be a dedication? They're doing stuff at the game, some dedications of stuff. Is there going to be a dedication in the field before or wait till after?
I haven't had any discussions with the school about that. I would think we'd wait till the very end, till it was all done.
Yeah.
And do
Can
one
you
big
just
one.
ask them so we're...
Yep.
Thanks.
Yep. We have our meeting tomorrow, so I'll ask at that point. Related to the fields, we do have some field issues right now with that ongoing construction and a lack of fields. So the board is going to have a discussion on how we want to use the money we received from Toll Brothers. If you recall, Toll Brothers was going to build a field at Wampatuck. Instead, we took that off the table and they donated $400,000 to this board to use for maintenance work and work on fields. The big problem seems to be JV baseball. The JV baseball was where the softball field is going, so they currently don't have a home. I had a meeting with Recreation yesterday on their budget, 2 potential homes for them. Behind the old gates, there's a field. We could do something there. And according to Recreation, the central field would be big enough to put a JV baseball field on. So I'm going to schedule them for our first meeting after town meeting. We can have a discussion on what we want to do and maybe make some decisions on where we want to go with that money to try to give some relief to JV baseball and some of these other teams for the spring. Not a big job for that, depending on what we do it. Kind of skin the infield, push it out a little bit, and then resod the infield. But it's already a field, so there's not a lot of earthwork and leveling and stuff like that.
And that will be the only regulation baseball. We don't have a regulation baseball field until the turf one's done.
Yeah.
So that's got to use freshmen, JV, varsity, practicing as well as all of Little League. So we do need another field that size somewhere in town.
If you drive by the public safety building, the new flagpole's up. That was donated by Tony Machini. It looks great. It's huge. The flag flying from it is giant. So thank you to Tony for that. The old flagpole will now go to the library and be installed at the library.
Thanks.
Ice picking is done for the fall. We're going to continue our flushing program. Last week of rain has been very good to us. If you drive by the reservoir, the road that kind of appeared is now gone again, back underwater. So we've put some water back in the reservoir. We're going to continue doing the flushing until we finish the flushing program that we have. Right now the weather's been good. We have not scheduled any further ice picking at this point. We'll wait to get the results of what they did this year, what they got out of the pipes, and we'll look in the spring, early in the spring, to see what kind of results we got from the ice pigging and the flushing, and then determine if we're going to do more ice pigging in the spring or wait till next fall and do it again. Budgets have been submitted to the town departments for the finance office. Nancy and I are currently reviewing 48 department budgets totaling $56.9 million in requests. Does not include the school department budget. This week, we'll be meeting with 26 members of the staff, Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, to go through all those budgets. I am tentatively scheduled, and I use the word tentatively, to present the selectmen the budget on 11/19. That is also the date that you will do the tax classification hearing, so just so you're aware, that's coming up also. The town received 2 reimbursements for FEMA finally for Storm Riley from March 2018. $86,000 and change for emergency seawall and sidewalk repairs, and a little over $6,000 for fence and stone wall repairs. We have filed 21 claims for Storm Riley. That was the March 2018 storm, totaling $5.1 million. They are in various stages of approval and reimbursement, but we've gotten $92,000, $93,000 back last week.
Is that in total of what we've gotten for Riley? Yeah.
Yep. And then finally, the regional sewer. We have our next regional sewer meeting next week. I think it's Wednesday, Sean. I'll send you the date. I know you like to go to those. So we should have some more information on that at our next meeting, but we're hoping to get that back on track and moving as quickly as possible. That's what I got.
Okay. Karen, anything for Jim?
No, thank you.
More?
Nope.
Sean?
No.
Thanks, Jim. Okay, next item is an update on the wind turbine. Al Banger?
Thank you. I'm here to give you an update on the noise compliance testing that we've been doing. Just 2 points of background. You awarded a contract to Epsilon Engineering back in May of 18. Then they began working with us and the DEP to develop the testing protocol, get a final agreement on that. It took up until December before the DEP gave us final blessing on the testing plan, and testing began on March 19th. Since March 19th, we've had 3 evenings that met the specified conditions for testing as specified by what we had put together based upon when we were hearing complaints from residents about the noise level. They've generated the 12 pieces of data, 12 of the 16 that are in their contract, and the plan is that when they've completed the 16 data points or 4 tests at 4 locations, then they would produce a full report for us on whether or not the noises coming from the turbine are within DEP regulations or if it is in non-compliance. We're probably in a standstill right now because about 4 weeks ago the turbine experienced problems, operational problems. They've had to remove some components and ship it out to have it undergo some repairs and be brought back in again. They expect to have the turbine up in about 2 weeks, and then testing would resume. I explored with Epsilon, should we just go ahead and, since we're having trouble finding the wind conditions to do the testing, should we just abort the 4th test and go forward with the 75% of the data we've already collected and have them do the report? And what they suggest is that if the turbine gets back in operation within the next 2 to 3 weeks, then we continue to monitor it, and up until December 31st, if by December 31st they can't get that 4th test done, then let's go ahead and just analyze what we have. They've set aside January to do the analysis for us so that they can deliver a report to us in early February. If they cannot get the data by the 31st, we go forward with the 3 sets. Otherwise, we still have the alternative to continue to wait and test whenever the conditions present themselves. But I think, there's some anxiety and anxiousness to get going on this thing and get the data, and let's have it out in the open. And I think this is a reasonable recommendation on their part, is to, give them until December 31st to get the 4th piece of data, and then develop the report, and then we would have the report as of February 1st or so. That would be my recommendation as well. Questions?
Yes,
Karen?
please.
I'm still confused about what the conditions are that you're looking for in order to do the testing. And why it's so hard to find it, because I keep getting emails from people complaining
Yeah.
and showing
Yeah.
me
Sure. What we did.
wind speed
I'm sorry.
at night and saying they can't sleep.
Yeah.
So I'm confused,
Okay.
frankly.
Sure, that's reasonable. Up till 2017, the Board of Health tracked, up through 2017, the Board of Health tracked complaints and had it correlated with positions and wind positions, direction, and speed at the turbine. There was a very high correlation with certain wind conditions, and I think it's above 10 miles an hour coming from the southwest direction was when like 93% of the complaints were occurring. So we said, okay, let's do one of two things. First of all, let us mitigate the operation of the turbine during the summer months from June 1st to October 15th, when those conditions between 11 at night and 6 a.m. are the ones that created the series of complaints. When we put that in place, the next summer, complaints did go down significantly. We've still decided that it's appropriate to test to see that is the turbine actually in compliance with the DEP. And so therefore, the DEP and our engineering consulting firm developed the test protocol that DEP would validate that would say when these wind conditions present themselves, it must be in compliance. So that's what they're looking for. They're looking for very specific wind conditions to qualify and meet the DEP generated and agreed to protocol. Okay? If we don't do that, then the data will be meaningless from a legal standpoint. So the idea is if the turbine company is in compliance, is not in compliance, then they have a responsibility and are willing to, without question, correct it or do whatever's necessary to make those conditions to get back in compliance. If they are in compliance, then it's not a legal matter for them. So we want to be very careful to stay within the boundaries of what's legal. Okay?
So the complaints I'm getting indicate wind out of Marshfield. Is that an issue? Is it because they might have different wind conditions in Marshfield?
Absolutely, yeah. The airport at Marshfield monitors winds. Heaven's sakes, if you look at the last storm we just had, if you drove from Scituate to Norwell or Scituate to Cohasset, you would think there was no storm at all in Cohasset and Norwell. Maybe not so much Norwell, I don't know about that, but, you look at just the leaves down. So wind conditions are different everywhere. And what the wind conditions that are necessary to correlate are the ones at the turbine top, because that's the only thing that can decide what the turbine's going to do, okay?
Right.
All right? So that's what's matter. And that data is all available to the engineering firm, and in fact, we've provided it to one of the residents who wanted that data as well.
All right, thank you.
You're welcome.
I just find it difficult to understand why we haven't had those conditions for over a year.
Why it's taken over a year to get the data?
Yeah, it's just a little,
Because those wind conditions
Frustrating.
the wind conditions that caused all those complaints are not occurring all that often. The complaints we're hearing now must be are from other conditions.
right.
And the testing, in order to do the testing, they have to predict what the conditions will be tomorrow night, or this, later in the day or that night during the week, and then get their team together and get out there and do the testing at 3 a.m.
And how many weeks of operation has the wind turbine been broken this year, Al?
I don't know.
It's been a lot. So I
Maybe,
think we
yeah.
should find that out, too. Getting our return on our investment here, it's been down quite a bit.
Yeah, we are financially sound on that because our contract with them requires them to produce a certain number of 3 million kilowatt hours per year. If they fall short of that, then it's necessary for them to compensate us for our lost advantage. And they've done that over the 7 years of operation. There have been 2 years when they've done that. So our contract puts them right at about what the capability is of the turbine. They'd like it to run more, obviously. The more it runs, the more they get paid. So our financial gain and theirs are directly linked. When it runs, they get paid. When it runs, we get benefit. We get the extra benefit of, if it doesn't run and they fall below the threshold, then we get paid anyway.
Thank you.
And when it's not running, we're not getting noise complaints.
I know.
Just a couple of questions, Al. And I think that we did say in the contract, you'll get all the data, not just their average data when
Yeah.
they do get it, so we can really look at the range, because I know that's important to a lot of the stakeholders. Can you just quickly run through as much as you know about what is the mechanical problem? And I'm a little concerned that, will it be done by December? Because I think that's a very important data point. I don't know if it has anything to do that would impact the conditions that are bothering people.
There is, I don't know the name of the piece of equipment within the turbine up at the top, the nacelle, but it is something that keeps indicating an overheating condition, so the turbine shuts itself off.
Up in the,
Yeah, right, to protect itself. So they've had this problem over the last, I would say, 18 months on and off, and they thought they had it fixed. The experts on this are in Austria and Romania, believe it or not. So they have to, this component has been sent back to the repair place in Romania, I believe, where they are updating it. And as I spoke with them, with the owners of the turbine last week, and he said that they're very encouraging, that it seems to be they're getting closer to finding out exactly what is the problem with it rather than just repairing it, that there's something that's the problem. And this turbine has a history, because of the fact it's a Chinese turbine, and then there was some problems with the turbine manufacturer having allegedly stolen software from a U.S. company. So now the Chinese people who build it are not allowed in the U.S.
is there any indication that the actual machine, I guess the data will show, is this malfunction has been causing all these problems? I mean, will the data just show whether
Causing the problems with it shutting down, you mean, or the?
the noise?
Oh,
Yeah.
no, I don't think so. It'd be
Yeah.
nice if it was, but,
Yeah.
yeah.
Thank you, Al.
I don't think it's not a grinding noise coming from this. It's more of an
It's the
overheating
actual-
situation.
Yeah. Okay.
Sure, we'd all be happy if that were the case, though.
I know. That would
I
be
was just
easy.
going to ask, Al, are you comfortable, was tomorrow's point, with us being compensated when it doesn't run? I know, you're just part-time, but it's like someone watching it, Nancy, or we relying on them to say, oh, yeah, here's a check for $1,000.
Oh, no,
How does,
There's a minimum.
I know that, and that's
We
why I
track
don't
it,
have
yeah.
a problem with it not running, if it doesn't run, that's.
No, it's,
But are we confident that we're being compensated when it's
yes,
not
we
running?
get two sources of data. We get data from the power company, who tell us what was generated.
Okay.
And then we get from their operation, and they say what that's generated, okay? And then they actually correct. If they say they've generated more than the power company did, they adjust for that and say, okay, we're going to go with the power company's numbers. They're very fair in that regard.
All right, good.
So we can track how many kilowatt hours are produced. Then they bill us on a basis of a contracted amount. And the year is up March 31st, and so in around April, May, early May, they would have calculated what we would calculate, and they would calculate what was owed, and we get paid for that.
All right, okay.
Is that, yeah.
Al left me his Bible, which I updated.
Say it again?
Al left me his Bible, which I updated.
Oh, right. Yeah, Al, just to reiterate a little bit, I think we're all a little bit frustrated with the fact that it's taken, almost 2 years to get a test done. And I think the neighbors are frustrated
Sure.
with that as well. I think we have a little bit of leniency right now because it's not a problem in the winter. Windows
Yeah.
are closed and it's not, it's not
Yeah.
that prevailing wind that causes the problem. But we really have to wrap this up, as I
Yeah.
think you would agree. And
Yeah, I think that's why we have the choice, we could pull the plug now.
I don't think it makes sense.
It would
right
give
now.
us a month advance on the, getting the report in, but I think,
I mean, the springtime is when it's going to become
Yes.
a potential
Absolutely.
nuisance again, and we have to.
Right.
We have to have concrete answers at that point in
Yep.
time that says
Right.
violation, not violation, and kind of move past wherever.
and I think we have to think about what happens if there is if there is not a violation.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah, I mean, that's-
we've talked about it since Rick Murray was on the board, so it's been many, many years. And I think at some point, we've just got to, we've got to prove to the residents that it either is a violation or isn't a violation, and then, move on, I think. Yeah.
To Al's point about the, what if nothing happens, a month or so ago, there was legislation, there was a hearing at the State House about a bill that would require a commission to study the health impacts of wind turbines. Our resident, David Daugherty, whom you are all familiar with, and I both testified at that as a really good tool that would be useful to us if the health concerns are outside of the scope of what's mandated, at least give us a tool. So at a future meeting, or maybe perhaps in February, when we have the data, we might want to consider whether this board would write a letter of support for that bill, just to give it a little more oomph. But it can wait.
I mean, we'll certainly follow any state or federal guidelines. If they find something else that has to be done according to the running of the turbine, we'll certainly abide by that. But I think this is the first step towards conclusion. All right, Al, thanks for coming in.
Okay.
So are we all in agreement not to stop the testing now and to revisit it 12/31 and?
Cool. Could I just ask one more question?
Yep.
So Epsilon knows something.
They have all the data.
They have all the data. Is this a big secret that they're not going to share with you?
No, not at all. It's just
you have a sense of which way it's going?
It's not like going out with a microphone and a tape recorder and just saying, "Oh, I can hear it," or whatever. It's I don't want to say millions, but might be millions of pieces of data, because they do this incredible fast monitoring of the noises, and then that's all put into some kind of algorithm, and they crank it. So there's about an $8,000 cost to convert that data into something that is intelligible.
So they don't know where the data is
They would
going
be
right
willing
now?
to. They would
I
be
don't
willing.
think we should.
No, I'm just asking, do they have a sense?
I
Or
don't want to get
They-
that out until let's do the whole testing, because I'd hate for Al to say it's leaning this way. and
No,
then
no, I'm not
before it's
asking
come
him to do that.
Yeah.
I'm asking,
Yeah.
do they have a sense? Or have they just not done the next step because it's another amount of money to do it?
Well, first of all, they are engineers, okay?
Yes.
So they are going to go kind of follow the plan that they've
The
got.
protocol, right.
And they haven't spent the time and the money to then analyze the data. Now, and that's an
Okay.
alternative. We could spend some extra money and say, analyze what you got, and then we'll still wait for the fourth piece of data. But that would be an added expense for the town. Right now, we've got a $50,000 contract with them. It involves analyzing that set of data one crank through, so.
I'm just asking the man in the street question.
Exploring options.
Yeah, well, just,
Good.
thank
Thanks,
you.
Al.
You're welcome.
Okay, next, we're going to have a discussion vote on surplus auction. Jim?
So we have a ton of old vehicles, school equipment. The school equipment and things are at the old gates. We get those out of there before we start tearing that building, the C wing, down. We've declared them surplus, so they are ready to go. We just need the board's approval to hold an auction. If you look at the list, we are divesting ourselves of some of our Navy. You have a 13-inch Boston whaler with a trailer, a 17-foot Boston whaler with a trailer, a 25-foot Boston whaler with a trailer, and a 26-foot Boston whaler. So we're getting rid of some of our boats. A couple of Humvees that we've used in the past, 300 and something armchairs from the schools, armchair desks, those ones you hated when you were a student. A lot of chairs, so a lot of stuff from the schools, but we are getting rid of a lot of vehicles. We've contacted an auction company. We did send out a proposal for auction companies. We get one back. They take care of everything for us. They do the publication. They do the auction. I think they get paid a piece of what they Excel, is that how it works out?
It goes on my fire screening.
But we got to get rid of this stuff, and it's just been piling up, and we've been waiting and waiting, and now's the time to just have someone come in and get rid of it for us.
So will the auction be held here?
Yeah. Yep.
And we'll post it so residents know and...
We'll post the list too, and they'll put the list up, if people have a look at the list, what's available, and
No question? Where do the funds go when we take them in? Back into the general fund, or?
Sean?
I did see something I did want.
Sean, any
He
questions?
said something he wanted?
Do you have any questions, Sean?
No,
Karen?
no,
he's trying to decide he's going to bid on. He likes those Humvees.
no.
Yeah, we did talk about the fact that the aquaculture project might need a boat. We seem to have some boats. Are any of them suitable to give to the, I'm just asking, I mean,
To the constable.
yeah, the constable.
Well, the Shellfish Constable is either the Marshfield Harbor Master, which it is currently, he has a boat, or it could be our Harbor Master, he's got a boat.
So there is no need for a boat,
There's
an
no need
extra
for
boat?
them to have
Okay,
boats. no.
just making sure. There was a mention of it at one point, so,
Needed a shallow boat.
thank you.
Great. So, is there a motion?
Move to approve a surplus auction dispose of obsolete items.
Second.
Second by Mr. Harris. Further discussion? The man in the audience?
Yeah, Rick Murray, 16 Collier Road. Stimulated by Selectwoman Curran's comment about the funds being redistributed back to the general fund. Were those boats initially purchased with the Waterways Enterprise Fund monies? And if so, shouldn't those monies be returned back to the
Yeah,
enterprise?
if there's something that was purchased with enterprise funds, it goes back to the enterprise fund.
Thank you very much.
It becomes a
Yeah.
receipt of the enterprise
Yeah,
fund. Yep.
Thank you very much. Same thing for anything with DPW, or with
Water,
transfer
sewer,
station.
yep.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Good point. Any further questions? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye, it's unanimous. Excuse me. Okay, cruising right along now. We have an update, a resolution and notice of non-compliance turbidity violation. Sean?
Yeah, Sean had a last-minute conflict, he wasn't able to be here, and Kevin didn't make it back from his OSHA training in Rhode Island, so I'll do this as best I can. Sean McCarthy's here, he'll cover for me when I screw up. But if you recall, last September, the water department was in, we had the issue with turbidity levels at the water treatment plant, and turbidity is just the clarity of the water. If it goes over a certain level, you're supposed to report it. We had hit it because of our problems with the sand filter that we had to replace. So we had the appropriation at the town meeting in the fall. We did all the work, shut the plant down in the winter time, shut it down, did all the work. DEP was out 2 weeks ago on our biannual sanitary survey, and they finally issued us our non-compliance letter. So it's a minor violation, but it is a non-compliance. So they finally issued the letter this October for a turbidity issue last September, so 13 months ago. We responded as required. We sent back all the stuff we did. And what we really wanted to share with you is our DEP rep in Lakeville, Jim McLaughlin, sent this back to Sean. Hi, Sean. We received your response to the turbidity non-CSA today, and that action has been closed out in our database. Thank you very much for your rapid response to resolve the situation. I also applaud the entire Scituate Department of Public Works for your work this year to overcome serious challenges with your water system. Although many of your customers are still frustrated, you are taking the proper managerial, financial, and planning steps necessary to repair your aged infrastructure. I look forward to continuing to work with you on more projects to restore your system to full resiliency. DEP never says anything nice about anybody. So that was a very positive thing for them to say. The guys are working very hard, but that was a big deal. That non-compliance really triggered all that work. We did about $1.5 million, Sean? About $1.5 million in repairs to the water treatment plant when we shut it down that winter. So to get a compliment from DEP is rare. So I want to make sure we shared that with the board, and the board knows it's been closed out. We're in compliance. And there really haven't been any issues with that since we did the repairs last winter.
So I'm going to repeat what you just said, just so no one misunderstands. That this is we've only had one violation, I guess, if that's even the right term, compliance issue with this, and it was the one from a year plus ago.
Correct.
And that's what this letter is about.
Correct.
That has been resolved.
Correct.
Any questions?
No?
Just thank you. Just thank you to Sean and the team.
Absolutely.
Yep.
I have to say, I was so struck by that in the background that I actually printed out the letter too, because they don't ever do that, and their team's doing a great job. So,
You can pass that down.
I'm gonna
to the
post
town
it
meeting.
Great. Sean, please pass along our thanks from the board. Okay. Moving on, way ahead of schedule. A discussion vote on the MaxWorks contract to amend the request to change the type of system and length of contract for Cedar Point.
The board just basically needs to bless this. We applied for the $2.2 million MassWorks grant for a low-pressure source system at Cedar Point. After many meetings and quite long discussions, the board voted to not go with the low-pressure system, but instead to replace it with a gravity system that we currently have out there. We applied to DEP for an amendment to that grant to go from the low pressure to the gravity. And we also, being prudent, said we want an extension of the time to expend the grant from July of 2020 to July of 2021. They have approved that. All the board needs to do is vote to approve and execute what you have in front of you.
Awesome.
We will get the final sign-off on changing the use of it and also for the extension.
I don't think it's in there.
Great. And our follow-up question is going to be,
We had two bidders, Environmental Partners and Ty and Bond. The sewer department and the engineers are currently reviewing those, and hopefully for our meeting after town meeting, we'll be coming back looking to award a contract.
great. Awesome. Any questions about the extension for the grant?
No, just thank you.
Good news.
just to, when you said extensions, just time, not the area.
This time, correct?
Yeah, okay,
That, the credit for that goes to Brad. Brad did all the legwork on that, Brad Washburn. So
okay.
he's at the resiliency meeting.
Great. Can I have a motion?
Do we have a motion?
I don't think we have one.
I don't think we have one.
It's in the backup.
Well, move to approve the MassWorks grant extension application as presented by the town administrator.
Second?
Is that okay, Lorraine?
Yeah.
All in favor?
Aye.
Hi.
It's unanimous.
I'm sorry, who was the second?
Second by
Karen.
Karen.
Can't fill.
That was me, sorry, yeah.
Okay.
That's done in my head.
Okay, that brings us to the main event. So our next topic of discussion is a discussion and a vote on the shellfish aquaculture regulations.
We just received a letter from the resident. Show me the copies.
This is annoying.
So before we get started, go ahead.
Oh, yeah.
Go ahead.
Okay.
So we've had several meetings on this. Sean's been to several more and updated us on information all along. What I'd like to do is try and keep this on track and deal with, it seems to me at our last meeting, there are probably 4 to 6 really bigger issues that we have to deal with. And I'd really, if there's any additional information, you guys can give us a brief summary on that. But then I really want to focus on the half a dozen issues at hand, discuss them, and then see where it goes from there. I'll take a second to let everyone come in.
Need a bigger boat.
It's mine to be down here. Oh, okay. We gotta get our Susan Harrison bullet pointed the follow-up items from the last meeting that's in your packet. So I don't know if that's helpful, but just to try to be helpful and to
Wait.
highlight the points. Here. This one. We're gonna need one more chair.
Right here, Tony. This one.
This one. It says Lorraine Devon at the top. Yeah.
Got it, Karen?
Yeah, yeah.
One more chair up here, is it worth bringing down?
There is one more chair here, if someone
Oh, careful, sorry, you're all
would
connected.
like one.
There's your computer. It's
I
up
know,
in
you're
the
trapped in there. Can I give you my 2 cents, Mr. Chair? Oh, my. Mr. Davenport?
Okay. Great, so I'll,
Hi, welcome.
oh, welcome.
So these are, we have all of our committee members here, as well as Tom Shields from DMF.
Yes,
Do you
hi, Tom,
remember
thank
right
you for
there?
coming again.
I tried to outline follow-up items from our last meeting. As you recall, on October 1st, we presented the regulations to the Board of Selectmen, and at the meeting, there was a very full agenda and not enough time to really devote to discussing some of the big points. Additionally, you asked for some follow-up, including some budget follow-up on fees and budget and questions on those things. So today, we're here to address the follow-up items, as well as follow-up items on the regulations, as well as there was some follow-up items on the feasibility of Briggs Harbor with the recreational and commercial use. So we have an updated map for you. So we were hoping to go through that, and ultimately what we're requesting is the approval from the Board of Selectmen to move forward on the regulations and forward them to town council and DMF review. And then beyond that, we would work on stakeholder engagement with recreational commercial use of specific sites, because as these regulations are not site-specific. It's for all of the waterways in Scituate. So I didn't know if you wanted us to briefly touch on the follow-up
Why
items?
don't you briefly touch on
Okay.
any new information or any questions that we asked, and then we'll kind of...
Okay, so as far as the fees, there is some new information. That's not yet. So fees for the, there's a question on the annual administrative fee, the $25 fee. If there was any movement on that, the state, and we talked with DMF, and they suggested a home rule option, which would be 2 other towns have done it, and we would have to petition the legislature to raise the fee from $25 an acre to $100 an acre is what Fairhaven and Mattapoisett have done. They both received a home rule exemption. So that would be in the future. It would probably take 6 or 8 months to do this home rule exception. So that is another option. Granted, it doesn't cover all the costs, but it's a start in the right direction. Regarding the budget, you asked us for a 5-year budget. I don't know why it's not going on the screen. It's in your packet. What I can quickly walk you through this. We gave you 3 options: a pilot with expansion, a pilot with no expansion, and then the pilot only. Because I think there's a lot of moving pieces here as far as budget. So you've kind of got your high end and your low end, and the pilot with expansion and with the no expansion, I've also did an assumption that we would apply for a home rule exemption. So increasing the $25 to $100 per acre. So again, we've got the application fee of $300, the state acre fee of $25, which we could go up to $100 if we do a home rule exemption, a pre-qualification list, and then we've got the annual reporting fee. So those are the points of fees in the entire regulation, in the regulation packet that we've presented. If you were to change any of those fees, or if we do the home rule exemption, you've got your high end of 5 years would get you. And 5 years would get you close to $46,000. If you don't do an expansion and just keep the pilot, you get to around $30,000. And then if you just did the pilot and stopped right there and pulled everything out and didn't go any further, it's $10,000. And what we were concerned with was enforcement. So that would be money to buy us some enforcement, because while Mike is amazing, he does not have more than 24 hours in a day, and many other priorities. So we thought that we would need additional enforcement. Okay, and then the final, those were the regulation-specific questions that you had, and then the follow-up items on feasibility of Briggs Harbor. We had some people discuss, I wish we could get this one up. For some reason it's not projecting, but it's showing your screen.
Lorraine, do you have any, or Nancy, do you have any?
Just tired.
Magic?
Yeah. Because the others, like, no one really wanted to look at numbers, but you probably want to look at them.
Came over next to you.
Budget tech support. So there was some really thoughtful and helpful input from the community stakeholders on recreational use specifically. Really insightful suggestions, including, a boater's lane or a recreational lane going to the, Bass River, or I guess called Bass River, up to the Minot parking lot, basically, that tributary. And we took the map that we have and adjusted the acreage such that there was a boater's lane there, or a recreational use lane. Oh, there we go. Sweet. You are lucky.
Yay, thank you, Nancy.
Wow, tech support too. So awesome. This is.
Is that better or worse?
That's worse, I think. There we go. Yeah. Okay, so there we go. So we did a couple things. This would represent a pilot program, so it's 15 acres, plus it's technically 17 total because we added we kept the two non-commercial acreage because that's just a big question mark. We're not sure about that. So this, we kind of split it in two, even though 17 doesn't split directly in two. So we've got
multiples of 3.
Yeah, multiples of 3, maximum of 3 acres. So we've got 2 over there and 3 over here, and then a 2 to the side. And that's, if you look at between the acreage, between the boxes is 50 feet, those lanes. So you've got probably like 300 feet. We're guessing around 300 feet boater lane right there. And
at the bottleneck.
At the bottleneck. As it comes in, it's like way bigger.
Much more expensive.
So like the smallest point is around 300 feet. And we recognize that it changes a little, and that's why we put a larger 300-foot lane there. And we thought that would, we thought that was a really good suggestion, and we thought that could help, help with the collective use of Briggs Harbor.
Can I just interrupt, Tony?
Sure.
You changed that, so if it wasn't for the residents telling you where they spend their time,
Yeah.
then you had that, they were all covered with blue squares, and I think
Yeah.
it's important for those folks that haven't seen this, this is a lot better than what we had
This
you
is
had
more
first
reflective
presented.
of the pilot. And
Yeah.
this is maximum. Not all 5 farmers who apply may apply for 3 acres, some may apply for 1 or 2.
Can I just ask one other question? If some person had both plots side by side, could you not take those and even get them even
Yeah.
further?
That's a good point, Sean. We could. We didn't want to do that now because we don't know if someone would apply for 2 or 3, or if they'd want, we're assuming the low tide to high tide would be good, those 3, so that you could work them as the tide comes in. But I don't want to make too many assumptions on what people are applying for. So once you had the applications, you can squeeze them together to create such that you would have boundary lines in between the different farmers, but not boundary lines for the one individual farmer.
It's not contiguous, too.
And not contiguous, so. So there, I mean, again, this is not, we can modify this again and again and again. And I also want to point out, this is not part of the regulations. We were asked to do, we were asked to do, we were asked to do regulations. This is not part of the regulations. We were also asked to look at feasibility, because if we came to you with regulations and everyone had a question mark of where would we even go, we have this visual of a spot that's currently truly open, truly approved. So it's a starting point. It's not by any means.
Your first map had 30 acres identified, right?
32, yes.
And this is 17.
This is just a pilot, 17.
Yeah.
Max 30.
Understood,
Maximum
but
75.
to her point, the scope of and the scale of how many get approved aren't even in the regulations, so that doesn't need to be decided tonight, right?
Correct.
Correct.
Right.
Because the regulations are not site-specific, it's for
Right.
all the waterways. That's a very good point.
So you're suggesting we would have another meeting to decide what the formation of the pilot is?
Well, I don't think you can connect both. Meaning the scale of,
Well, I think
All of
most
it.
of the people in the room want to get a little bit more detail than just the regulations of the legalities of it. I think they're looking for the meat of what we're considering here as well.
agreed.
Mr. Chair.
Yes.
To Maura's point, in thinking about this, I mean, this is a lot of work. I think, to me, there are two separate questions. One is, we charged the Shellfish Advisory Committee with coming up with rules and regulations for agriculture. And of course, the feasibility was a driving force of that. But the rules and regs, we still have some questions that weren't addressed in this yet, just about rules and regs that I think we can and should focus on and get finalized if possible tonight. The second piece is, how do those roll out and what does it look like? And we still have a long way to go in community engagement to make sure everyone has had a chance to have their input. And all the people in this room haven't had a full presentation of this proposal yet. So yes, we should flesh it out more, but I think the next step is to figure out what the rules and regs, vote them or not vote them, and then have a community meeting where all we do is look at what does it look like at low tide, what does it look like at high tide, have the questions that I know, I play out there all the time. I want to know what it's going to look like. And there's two separate things here. So I would personally like to get through the rules and regs is what we charged this advisory panel to bring us, because there's still some very meaty, outstanding issues on that piece. If we could focus on that, that would be my suggestion, Mr. Chair.
Thanks for your suggestion. I think we're going to go a little bit further, though, and try and give at least a sense of the board as to what we're thinking the next step is going to be. Hopefully, see how far we go,
Okay.
Certainly the first part is to get the rules and regulations right, and if we can all kind of opine on what the pilot plan, if we want a pilot plan, what the size of the pilot plan is, and that sort of stuff, so that's my humble opinion. What were the other points, Karen, that you wanted to go over, the questions?
Well, I thought, still outstanding, we hadn't resolved the transferability. That was still an open question.
So there's four things, I think, that are sticking in all of our minds right now. So we've got fees, which you kind of mentioned. We've got transferability, which we've got to talk about. We've got about how we actually decide who gets the license.
Right.
And then we've also got our Cohasset neighbors to consider also, and what role they're going to play in this as well. They're going to be, in order for this to be successful, in my opinion, we're going to need them to be on board for all the farmers to have, a better relationship to access this space and to use it freer. So I think that's another point of discussion. In fact, you know what?
Right there.
I'll write those down. Does anyone have any other key points that they thought, other than the ifs, ands, and buts and the regulations, that I think need to be discussed tonight?
No.
Nothing else major?
No, I think you.
Did I, 1 second, nothing? Okay, so now, did I miss anything from you guys is there anything else that you think is a critical component that needs to be figured out tonight for the regs? Yes, ma'am.
So in the regs, there's mention of recreational use and no impact to recreational use. So in looking at the regs, it would seem that you would also be discussing the recreational uses too.
Okay. Can I just have your name and address?
I'm Jackie Fahey Sandell. I'm at 147R Glades Road. So I'm on the back of the wetlands.
Okay. Just more for the,
Okay. For the records.
For the records, yeah.
So I look, I'm trying to figure out on the next one.
okay. Any other major topics that I missed, especially from the committee members? No? Okay.
One hand.
There's a
Oh, I'm
gentleman
sorry.
over to the left.
Yes, sir.
Some rules and regulations only. What about damage recovery when these things wash ashore? Anything, any type of device that's used out of adultery washes ashore, who's going to clean it up? And make it stick?
Good point.
Your name and address?
Gary Banks, 128 Indian Trail.
Clearly right on the wash-up zone. Anything else? Yes, sir.
Robert Thorndike, Glades Road and 220 Gannett Road. And I'm a shellfish farmer. Are we looking at other sites? Because there are so many water quality issues in this area. Are we looking at other sites? Is this the only option? Because I think that has to be addressed.
I'll try and answer, and then I'll open up. So we are looking at, these are the regulations for all of the available sites for the town of Scituate. These are the ones that we have the preliminary,
Pilot?
well, just the preliminary thought that it's going to be feasible. You know, there's other areas that we could do stuff on that are less likely to be feasible. So I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, that's what the group is moving forward with this, because it's most likely to succeed. Okay. I'll go with, sir, you first.
Okay, Peter Morathis, 20 Wood Island Road. And I don't know if these proposed rates were posted somewhere, so I apologize if they're out there and I'm asking something that's already in there. But in looking at other farms throughout the state, it appears that what happens over time is that structures get built to allow the folks, you know, tending their acreage, if you will. What are the regulations going to address to say we're not going to have a shanty town show up? Have you guys already addressed that? If it's there, good. If not, I think it should be.
Okay. Couple more, yes, sir.
Joni, as a follow-up to that, 8-1, the floats and docks near the growing area would be allowed. At the previous meeting, it was mentioned that they would not be used up in the Briggs Harbor area. The dock and the garage that goes on top of it, that would have to be in the rules and regulations that it would not be used in that location.
So I think that's in there, but we'll revisit that real quick. Okay, I think I saw one more hand, then we'll move on.
I didn't get that person's name.
I'm sorry.
That's William Bray.
You can be permitted under a 10
He's building out.
Yes, ma'am, I'll get to you. You'll be the last one.
Hi, Donna Dunn, 26 Kathy's Path. I'm kind of new to this, so I'm curious about, because I know a lot of people that use this area recreationally. So someone alluded to the fact of other areas that might be a possibility for these farming areas. Are there other areas that actually are on the list, or is it only this that is on the list?
Right now, we're looking at this area because it's most likely to succeed, and it already passed regulations isn't right, but there was someone has reviewed it and said that this is an acceptable area.
Water quality.
Yeah, water
Yeah.
quality, thank you. But there are other areas on the South River and some in the harbor, but those are less likely to be functional. And I'll end with you, ma'am. Just your name and address.
Kitty Ames, 950 Glades Road. I'm not familiar with this kind of farming shellfish, but I am Maine salmon, and there are lights
shellfish in.
lights would not be necessary or something like this?
No, definitely not, and
So
you
it's illegal.
can't,
It's
you
illegal.
can't,
It's illegal.
what's it, half an hour before sunrise? Yeah, you can't even be out
Can you
there at
just,
night.
so they're saying it's illegal. If you can just tell us.
Go ahead,
Yes.
Mike.
Yeah.
Yes, sir. Mike DeMelo, Constable. So there's no, it's illegal to shellfish at night. So it's strictly
But I
daytime
think our
hours.
concern is, are there going to be spotlights up in that area?
There shouldn't be no need for them.
Okay, so maybe we should have
So
something
maybe
in
we
the
add it in
regulation
to the regs.
that says that there won't be. Okay, so I'm going to read this list, and then we'll go down, talk about them one at a time. So, recreation, cleaning up the area, transferability, fees, the selection process, Cohasset, the lights component, and the shanty kind of component. So, the lights one, is that taken care of? You'll put something in there that says you can't have spotlights?
Sure.
Absolutely.
Everyone in agreement with that?
Yeah, it is already in here that,
Oh, is it?
not the lights component, but that you cannot be out there an hour before, you can only be out there an hour before sunrise and an hour after?
Technically, it's the taking of shellfish half an hour before sunrise and half an hour after sunset.
You're not gonna be in the
You're not
dark.
really working.
So one
Yeah.
could typically be actually out there, to be completely in
Yeah.
full transparency. There's no taking of shellfish, so you couldn't remove for harvest any oysters or clams
Okay.
before and after.
We could add something about spotlights.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. We are 12.5% there.
That one was easy.
The next one we're going to talk about is the shanties. So you said there's something in there already regarding the shanties?
There is.
Well, 8.1 is the agua float area.
As this is, as again, these are rules and regulations that encompass
That
all areas in Scituate. There's a section in there on aquaculture floats, because there are areas in the North and South River and the harbor that may be used with upwellers or floating gear in the future. That's why it's in there, but, you know, we discussed shanties as they have in Duxbury, and we specifically ruled that out as a possibility.
Is it ruled out in the regulations?
I'm not
They're
sure
just,
if it is
it's
or not.
silent.
It's not allowed.
It was never reviewed.
It's not allowed
I think
in
we were
the
going to send it to be
8.1.
reviewed by the harbor master, and we
Yeah.
never.
What do you mean it's not allowed in the regs?
We don't make a statement on it. So, I mean, we could
Yeah.
say.
Right, but we
Yes,
should,
That would be-
but we
don't
want
make
to.
a-
The pilot program.
Right,
Yeah.
but we want to.
Just one at a time.
Yeah.
Um,
Doing good. I'll jump in there.
Just for clarification, under section 1 as proposed, just as an aside, the reason these aren't posted yet is because they're not,
They're still drafts.
we're still drafting. So we're trying to get, and there'll be a chance for people to see them.
They were posted on the Shellfish Advisory.
Oh, they were.
And they were also posted on, a draft, with draft all over them.
Draft all over?
Draft.
Okay.
They were also posted on the Waterways site as well.
Thank you for doing your job.
Prior to the
Um,
public meeting.
Prior to the public meeting, so they've been posted for probably 2.5 months.
Okay. I know we've been looking at them that long. Just for clarification, under that section which regards floats,
Okay.
am I reading this correctly that a separate application, like you can get a grant, but if you want to put a float, under generals, if you want to get a float, that's a separate application?
Correct.
Okay, so
Correct.
just because you have a grant
That's
doesn't
a
mean you can go
10A.
throw a float out
Chapter
there?
91, 10A.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm fairly certain it's also a separate application for the Division of Marine Fisheries as well. Like, if you want to have an upweller, you have to apply for one with the state, not just the town.
Separate.
Okay, that's why that the law's referenced here.
That applies if you're actually growing shellfish from that float.
Yep.
That's when you want to permit from the marine fisheries.
So the permit has to be from the state level as well?
Yes.
Okay.
But if you're just using it as a shucking house or culling, but not growing shellfish, that's more the responsibility of the town shellfish constable, harbor master.
Do the farmers here find down the road, I mean, let's say this gets going and it's very profitable and everyone's doing great, is there any reason not to prohibit a shed structure in the regs now, at this point? I know it's silent on it now, but just to address that concern.
Can speak to that. So there were some concerns with the weather up there. It faces northeast. So if there were a house up there, shucking houses, yeah, it's an eyesore, but if there was no hurricane, where would they go? Would they go to a mooring somewhere? Would they go to the inner harbor? Would they be towed back to Scituate Harbor? So it is a concern. So we're hoping through the pilot program, we can see if it works or not, and then address the shucking houses down the road at some point. But anything that has a structure like that would also has marine fisheries approval and the harbor master under Chapter 91, Section 10A, because it's a seasonal floater dock.
We don't want to end it up Mr. Banks' yard.
Exactly. But that was discussed at a few meetings, quite a few meetings.
So the concern from the residents is, are there going to be 31 shucking sheds, or whatever we call them, out in that area?
No.
So how are we going to, but there's nothing in the the guidelines that are prohibiting it?
Because that's site-specific, so that would
Yeah.
be it would be part of the future pilot program fleshing of that out, not the rules and regulations. If I can speak to this site-specific, shanties are
Jamie,
usually...
wait one second.
Okay.
So what do you guys think about that? So would the shanties be part of the whole regulation, or would it be part of the pilot program?
For the operation of, you do this, do you have to have them where your farm is?
That's what I was getting to. So in an
Can you-
intertidal zone where water flushes away and you're left with sandy bottom, there's no need for a shanty. I mean, you only find those in Duxbury where in Duxbury it's only a few, moon tides per month where they actually even see the bottom. That's why they need those structures. But since you can physically stand on the ground, and even if you could be on your boat too and do work. So I don't see any need for shanties there in the future.
Perfect. And not to say that we might use them in the North River if those waters were approved.
Right. And technically, they should be high dry anyway. They should be on the bottom anyway. So really, it wouldn't be approved, or should not be approved.
Shanties.
Perfect.
Now if they're high and dry.
Anybody have a concern or does not believe that?
Tony, if it's in the regulation that it's allowed, it may show up at a later time, even though this committee here today says it won't happen. It needs to be written in that it's not allowed in that property.
Good point.
You don't need it, he says it, he does it, so.
I know, right.
So let's put it in there.
So but their point is, you may need it in the South River.
Yeah, so can't we be site-specific?
Yeah, be
Well, that would-
site-specific.
Yeah.
And we could
So do you want to put in
amend-
the regulations or in the pilot? I don't care.
The board also has the option to condition any single agricultural license. So if the board doesn't want those shanties at Briggs Harbor, they can put that under permit condition under issuing a license to the individuals in that area. So even though it might be available for use in other areas, you can condition a license to say not allowed in Briggs Harbor.
Okay. Does the board want to put it in the guidelines?
I would.
I do.
Okay, so let's put it in the guidelines, that there's no shanties allowed at the Briggs Harbor.
Okay.
Okay, good for,
Yep.
Hi, are we currently discussing only Briggs Harbor, or are we discussing Cohasset as well?
yes.
We don't have jurisdiction over
Yeah,
Cohasset.
I mean,
Cohasset.
I don't know your
So will there
question.
will there be a separate meeting for Bassing Beach, or is this all-inclusive of both?
This is inclusive of the town of Scituate land, which, does that include? Includes Bassing
Yes.
Beach.
That's correct. North and South River, as well as the harbor.
And just your name and address, sorry.
Caitlin Ahrens, I'm actually from Cohasset.
That's fine.
so I thought actually Bassing Beach was a part of Cohasset.
We don't really understand this map.
Okay, we'll get to that in one
Sure.
second. Okay. Yes, ma'am.
So
Just name and address.
Holly Whiteside, 1000 Glades Road. So people want to access the farms at low tide when it's flat and there's no water. Is the only access to those farms via boat and then docking and walking over? Or do they have access from the land?
Is there a public way?
There's,
I don't think so.
By
No,
boat
it's by
with
boat.
the outgoing tide, so one would use a
couldn't
skiff
pick the
that
worst
would
place to
drop down.
access.
Sir,
Sorry.
At low tide, there's usually no water.
sir,
anywhere around
I'm not going to
the
pick on you again. Just- You can't do that, sir.
Did you hear my point? You could not pick
Sir.
a worse place for physical access.
Thank you. If you speak out of line again, I'm going to have the police remove you from the meeting.
Excellent,
Okay?
thank you.
I mean, just follow the rules. Simple.
Well,
Simple.
that's what we're asking, that some rules be followed.
Jim, if the man speaks up again, can you please have the police officer come over and remove him? It's just not necessary, sir. The answer.
We're answering the
Yeah.
question. The vote was the answer.
So access to these sites would be primarily by boat unless somebody else had another plan to access it from land. Do we want to take this time to,
Not yet.
orient or not?
One second,
Okay.
is your question, so the answer is by boat, there's no access from land
So there's no access from the land, it's just via boat.
Yes.
Correct.
for this area, yeah. All right. So now, to help the woman here, if you can explain the map, I guess. Why don't you tell me specifically what your question is with the map?
Well, I mean, I'm assuming is this close to, through Cohasset? I mean, it borders Cohasset, right? So how's the access to these farms?
Jamie, do you want to?
So, right here is the break wall. And this is the channel that leads to the inner harbor, comes around. The town line, as far as I know, is roughly halfway down Cohasset Channel and then continues along this way. From here over is privately owned by the Cohasset Conservation Trust, purchased in the 1960s. And from here over is all Scituate land. And so this is the break wall. The glades, the property at the end of the glades is up there. Let's see, the Hatherley Country Club is down here. Does that orient you?
And then that's the river
Jamie, bring the
flowing.
map up so they can see the beach.
Oh, there you
Yes,
go.
there you go. There's Bassington.
There's Bassington Beach.
Yeah.
Could you point out where Bassington is?
Yeah. Along here. And this is like Bass River, which even at low tide, there's still at least ankle deep water. And then I believe up in here is Secret Beach.
Okay, so
Thanks, Jamie.
I can't wait to go there next summer.
Do we got that? Is that public?
Now it's all
Not through the glades, not through the golf course.
Another spit?
So the glades are not shown on this, but it'd be up that way.
So each one of these squares is roughly 200 feet, so we're about 600 feet
We
from
had to
shore.
walk down a
First
bank,
farms.
prior
So does that
bushes.
affect boating?
It wasn't conducive.
So
You
we
gotta go
can't-
like around these creeks.
Well, at high tide, well, we'll get to that in the recreational component, which we're going to do next. So we've got lights taken care of and shanties taken care of. Why don't we go to the recreational component? So this one was concerned with the boating aspect in that area. And so what's the regulations concerning passive recreation?
I mean, passive recreation is allowed all through this area. It would be different types of passive recreation from high tide to low tide, since high tide, there's 8 to 11 feet of water, and low tide, there's no water. So walking through, at low tide, walking through the area would be probably the passive recreation versus as the tide rises, there would kayaking, paddleboard, most types of passive recreation allowable.
Even through
even
the farms.
through the farms, like could go right over the farm. So it's 18 inches is the height of the farm. So if the tide is 8 to 11 feet minus 18 inches, that's, you know, 6.5, depending on where you are in the tide flow. We think about 5 hours where it would be exposed a day during daylight hours. There'd be a nighttime low tide that people probably wouldn't be.
There was fear of hundreds of buoys. That was misinterpreted.
Let's stay on that.
And then, so part of the channel would be, there's a lot of recreation happening on the beach over there, so that we created a channel. The one recreation that's, would be not happening, shouldn't really be happening there would be water skiing or tubing or snowboarding or wakeboarding. But I mean, that's actually not, yeah, as far as the area, it's not what should be narrow wetlands area to, similar to the North River where you don't want the banks to be eroded, and that contributes to the bank erosion.
So that should be currently monitored and enforced by,
It should be, we probably should have no wake.
Us today.
It should be a no wake zone, based on the
Farms are
marshland there. Farms are not, it shouldn't be a place that's, but it should be a place where there's a lot of passive recreation.
sure.
So the concern, I guess, is people who currently use boats there, and what's their capability of doing that in the future? And you're saying, Mike, is there supposed to be boating in that area, or Steve?
I'm sure you could at high tide, anywhere. I mean, half our rivers are tidal. I mean, with the 10, 12 tide surge, but, I mean, you definitely go in at low, high tide, but low tide, you're not, unless you miss the tide, time and tide wait for no man. But if you're there at low tide and you're stuck there, it is what it is, but really, there's not much else going on in there besides passive recreation and some boats transiting and hanging out at the beaches.
And passive really wouldn't be impacted.
Right.
A couple of hands up, too.
Yeah, the board first, yeah.
Just a-
Karen?
Did you have something, Sean?
No.
Just a question to our harbor masters here. Hi, harbor master. Is there a marine law as far as the wake? I mean, I would assume because of conservation, you're not supposed to be in there making a wake
No wake
anyway.
zones, like Bassins Beach, is no motorboats within 150 feet of shore, and then from 150 feet to 300 feet, it's slow, no wake.
Okay. I mean, it is a sensitive
You
area.
can't really water ski and tube without a wake, right?
Yeah,
No.
but that's 300 feet from the shore.
So, Jamie, just, where's 300 feet, that's probably this, you said it's
Halfway.
200 feet to the,
So you're probably talking about, well, from shore, probably about right around there, it's like 300 feet.
okay.
It depends on where the shore.
shore is moving.
The shore is moving.
Yeah, the yellow line is the yellow line is the mean high tide.
The
but yeah, I
shore
get
is
it.
definitely moving.
And I just want to point out for the people that maybe hadn't had a chance to see the regulations, and it's hard to go from site-specific to rules and regs, but the rules and regs, in the prologue, it says, in determining, and this is what's proposed, in determining whether to grant a license, the town is obligated to protect and preserve the existing fisheries and to minimize the impact of other uses of marine environment. And then in another section, 4.5, no license shall permit a licensee to impair or materially obstruct navigational waters. So that is part of proposed, the regulations for everything. And then now we need to make it site-specific.
Good point. Anyone else from the board? All right, I'm going to go to the people that raised their hands. Just to move the thing along, just make your point and, yes, ma'am.
I just wanted to challenge the depth of the water, because my very unscientific effort of pouring a rock over through a rope, it's about 6 feet at high tide.
Okay.
So that means that it's probably 3 feet deep, maybe on 3 hours before high tide. I'm just not sure where your depths came from, whether anybody really did any serious analysis.
We'll go back up there. and
We can go back out there and
survey it.
retest.
Yeah.
We were at a higher tide.
Well, I think that
Yeah.
just going from saying it's 7 to 11 to saying it's actually really 4 to 6 feet limits the amount of time people that you can kayak over it or, you know, and kayaks have,
That would be a good thing.
can pretty much go over anything.
Oh, yeah.
But that means that paddleboarders, can't fall off their paddleboards to just limit people's ability to
Okay.
traverse.
Thank
Yes,
you.
sir.
We'll look into that.
Yes, sir.
Tim Davis, I chair the Harbor Committee in Cohasset.
It's on the ground
I've sent a
outside.
letter to
Oh, the higher rock?
the board. Hopefully you can
7.
disseminate the letter. I think Steve will attest the letter as well. In general, I can say that the Cohasset community, while it supports agriculture in general, they're very concerned about this project. Over 800 people from our community and yours as well and others use that space for recreational purposes during the summer. Commercial lobstermen use it early in the spring. And so it's highly used, and this would, anything approaching this would significantly and severely impact the use of that area. Thank you.
Can I ask a question? If you don't mind, Scott, can you address that? Do you use this area?
I'm not sure where that area is. The pictures that were on the computer, there are areas within that picture I do fish. I currently have gear there now. If that's the channel that goes up into Briggs Harbor, I've run lobster traps right up that channel.
Up the channel, but
Right up
not,
the channel into Briggs Harbor.
but not in this area over here to the right.
Where somebody was explaining, at low tide, there's ankle deep water that goes up, that is the channel that I fish.
This would show you where Scott's talking about. This defines the various recreational and commercial fishing
traps
uses
shouldn't be
in this
impeding
area.
navigation
I'm
either.
happy to leave this with you. It's an attachment to the memorandum that I sent to you as well.
Sean?
The reason I had called
He's
on,
talking up.
the reason I had called on Scott, he's a full-time lobster, not to put you on the spot, but thanks for answering it. If, as I was told all along, this area where you're proposing is high and dry at low tide.
Twice a day.
High and dry.
High and dry.
So either I'm missing something. I always thought lobster pots had to be in the water the whole time.
Pretty sure.
Well, you know, we can't be talking about the same area, so I really need to get
I
that
would like
nailed
to
down.
see the exact location. But yes, traps are out of water at low tide, in the flats, off of the glades, and Briggs Harbor area. There's eelgrass that is there that you set your pots in, and they're out of water there. I'm not sure if the shell fishing is allowed in eelgrass areas or not, but I seek out eelgrass to put the traps on.
Yeah, so a couple of things. So lobster traps should also not be impeding navigation. So if there's lobster traps there, they should not be impeding navigation if we're going to call this a channel. And also, too, we're not putting any oyster traps or cages where there's eelgrass, because that impacts the environment. So that's part of the marine fishery study as well.
Yeah, I wanted to echo the point of the marine fisheries would look at this. It wouldn't be the regulations. Once, if there's a proposal for a farm, then DMF would go out and actually do a site inspection to make sure that, that there is not eelgrass there, or that it's competing with another fishery. And that's something that Tom's group does.
Farms have to be 25 feet from eelgrass.
Yeah.
By definition.
Yep.
Dave?
I was just going to mention that Craig and I and a member of the Duxbury Shellfishing Committee went out last weekend and walked it, and I'll just reiterate or agree with what was said from the board, is the water within that area is up to your ankles at most at low tide. However, within the river, if you walk back 100 yards and you're within that area, you're up to your knees at low tide. So I guess you could be fishing a lobster trap back there, but not where they're proposing to put their gear right now.
Diane Arians from Cohasset. My question again, when low tide, I mean, I spend the summers out there all the time between boarding and kayaking, and it is completely flat. There's no water out there at low tide, so are we going to see cages all over the harbor? And as well, I mean, are we going to see, how do they mark them? Are we going to see, are there going to be?
We'll get to that in a minute, but yes, there will be cages.
Yeah, I mean, that's going to be a significant eyesore, and it's going to impact recreation.
I'll get you in 1 second. Yes, ma'am. In the back.
I am involved in recreational use on that harbor. I'm in boats, and in the summer, I'm concerned that when boats are going, they go very slowly, so it is a no-wake zone. I think that's very well aligned to. But they're coming, in opposite direction. I'm concerned that that little bit of space isn't going to be enough. Also, the folks that come out from Glades Road use their paddleboards and kayaks to come over the marsh and then join into the main tributary or channel or whatever you call it. I think at low tide, all of a sudden to just see all these traps, and I'm with Beth, I've been out there at all different tides, I think it's going to be a big impairment to the ability to float over these things regardless, if you're passive recreational use with a stand-up paddleboard or a kayak. And I've done that personally all through the summer.
And so what we're trying to do is create channels for transportation or for recreational use, as well as, I think they said it was 18 inches. So you shouldn't have, there's blocks of time when I imagine you're there when the water's there, that it shouldn't be that much of an impediment. But, John, did you have your hand up, or you?
I just wanted to say, I've lived in the area for 50 years, and John Tedeschi, 1 Jericho Lane.
And I beg to differ, Scott, as far as the fishability. I've never seen a lobster boat in that area. The traps would be completely out of the water at low tide. You couldn't get a boat up in there at low tide.
So we'll take a few more, but just stay on track in terms of the recreational use. Yes, ma'am?
Me?
No, behind you, then I'll get you.
I have a question about the recreational use. So a lot of people take dogs out there, and there's a lot of children at play. If you're allowed to play over that water at a certain time and there is an injury, how's that handled?
Jim?
Same as it is today. How's it handled now?
Insurance.
Yeah.
You know, they-
No different than it is today.
Stakeholders have to have insurance for what they're doing out there.
And the towns hold harmless.
Yep.
And also to the towns in the regulations and insurance, the town is to be hold harmless.
Yep.
Yes, ma'am?
Deanna Lehner, Bailey's Island. I was hoping somebody here could represent the sailing situation with the kids, either from the sailing club or the yacht club, to tell us how much do the sailboats draw, how many hours a day are they out there teaching the kids? And I think most particularly, that's exactly where they do the turnabout training. Yeah, and how does that impact them? What's it going to do?
I have children in the sailing program I can speak.
Sure.
On. So both Cohasset Sailing Program and Cohasset Yacht Club conduct their sailing activities out there. We would have to get them to specifics, but they have a youth program of about 100 kids who are out there all summer from Monday to Friday. It's a full-day program. It goes from 9 to 4. I think it's Monday to Thursday, and then half-day Friday upon occasion. So I'm sure they would have something to say about that because that's been in use for decades. I'm not sure of the schedule of the sailing club program, but I can speak to the yacht club one because my daughter was an instructor.
Okay. Couple more, yes, sir?
Who's going to monitor this, Cohasset Harbor Master or Scituate Harbor Master?
Scituate?
Shellfish.
Yeah, all the way around.
We have a shellfish constable.
And the police can monitor as
I would
well.
imagine both harbor masters would watch the area for safety, but the shellfish constable will be.
And the police have authority as well.
Sorry?
And the Situate police have authority as well.
Police department, yeah.
Environmental police.
Environmental police.
Couple more, ma'am, you in the purple?
Yes, Donna Dunn, Kathy's Path. Just to clarify the recreational, the boaters, other than the normal restrictions where obviously it's too low to bring the boat in, and beachers who come in, they may come in kayaking or paddleboarding and using the beach. Is there going to be at any point a restriction to getting to the beach and bringing your boat or your kayaks through that area at any certain time of the day or time, other than what would be normal?
No. Not at all. No, not at all.
People are free to walk.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, I think I saw one other hand up, and I'll get to you last, sir. Yes.
A number of things. The underwater structures have to be marked with marker buoys with 36 inches of cord attached to the marker buoy so that they can be seen and people don't run over them and hurt themselves.
1 second, is that true?
Not every piece of gear, it's just the corners of the acre that are.
8.9.
It's actually Tom Shields should probably answer that. Tom? Could you speak to what needs to be marked?
DMF regulations require that the four corners of every individual license be marked with the board. That's the extent of it. To limit that, Tom, if, like I said earlier, if some person had two plots side by side, instead of having 8 corners marked, could we eliminate that? Could we narrow that down to 4? So you're not having to just go slalom through. Theoretically, sure.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So there could be as few as 20 to 25 buoys out there.
Did you have another one?
All of the equipment has to be marked with a danger sign. There has to be...
Hold on for a second. Is that accurate?
No.
Okay.
In the regulation.
I'm not sure which regulation you're referring to.
8.9.
I think he's talking about the town would put the 4 white buoys in the corners.
Is that an hour?
Yeah.
The proposed regulations.
Yeah, that's what the town would put orange and white
Yeah,
buoys up
I
there.
mean,
Yeah.
That's the
we don't
corner
have to do
buoys.
it.
That's
It's
the corner
those are the
buoys.
corner buoys.
Yeah.
And it's just to notify of what it is.
They could say
So the
aquaculture.
corner buoys have to have.
Yep. The
It
4.
has to be marked with danger,
Yep.
yeah. And the,
There's the orange and white buoys.
there's a section in here about the actual shells that are used. On 8.0-4, it talks about having a clutch, which is a group of shells to catch the smaller oysters and keep them in place. And contradiction to it is that no shells should be discarded overboard. So what are we talking about? Are we having shells or aren't we having shells?
I know they're reading it right now.
What was the
What
reference?
is contradictory?
I don't understand what's contradictory. 8.04, plant clutch for the purpose of catching. Culch, sorry, for purpose of catching shellfish seed.
I don't see anywhere where
I don't-
it prevents one from having shells discarded, though. I don't see that. I do see the plant culture.
8.1G, number 3. No shells should
G.
be discarded overboard.
Is that referring to so people don't get cut if they were walking, the shells don't wash up?
That was a shunt.
So-
Yeah, but that's
So if that's-
Probably from shucking, yeah. It's
probably from
oysters.
shucking. You don't
Yeah.
want to be like, you shouldn't be,
If it's sea clams, if they
Eating
shut
them
those,
out
they
there.
end up on
right.
the beach. They can present.
So that's
the
like a
windsurfers.
safety thing.
So do you think you can clean, does it contradict? Do you think it doesn't
I don't think it
It
does.
could be. This was taken.
Wait a second.
The template by which we use to.
But these are in the racks. These are in the racks versus outside.
Correct.
Throwing overboard. So it's different to have the shell inside the
Yeah, it is.
equipment, whether it's a float or a bag or a rack, versus material thrown
Being
overboard.
discarded overboard.
So there's two different things. They're both shells, but they're different things. You want them contained, for different purposes, you want it contained in the equipment and not just discarded.
I mean, we could strike
I
three
mean,
from there, no
if-
shell material debris may be scattered. This is an area that is going to be, all of the debris will be swept away
Yeah.
with any storm
I mean,
or any movement.
if the suggestion is to take it out, we could take it out, but I don't think it's conflicting.
I think G3 refers to floats, though. I think it's specific, if you're on a float and you're shucking or something.
Yeah.
Right, you can't then discard it overboard.
You need to take it out with you.
Exactly.
I think it's necessary for the regulations. I mean, not that this particular site would have floats, but.
Right.
Correct, this site wouldn't have floats, but this is for everyone.
Continuing, 8.4, exclusive use of the area of water flats and creeks. You're saying that the kayakers can go all through the area if there's enough water, but this says that the farmer has exclusive use of the water flats and creeks, 8.4-A.
Exclusive right to take all
Yeah, to
shellfish
take
therefrom.
shellfish.
Exclusive use of the waters.
Shall have during the term
Yeah, I see.
exclusive use of waters, flats, or creeks, and the exclusive right to take. He's right, it's separated.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Then we should.
So
we
just
should
get rid of the and.
Strike that then.
Strike the, but they do have the exclusive use to take shellfish.
Right, but they,
But not the exclusive use.
To enjoy that.
Right.
So, do you want a note to remove that?
I'll just
Yeah.
remove up to the and start the exclusive use. That works.
no, because it does speak to recreation.
8.6, the right to transfer, it should go back to the town.
We're not on that yet.
We're going to get to that.
That's the next
So we're just
topic.
talking about the recreational stuff now. We'll get to that in a minute.
Oh, okay.
So one thing I want to say, just to try and make it more productive, if we can all move forward with the sense that this is going to happen, and try and be productive in terms of ways to improve it, as opposed of ways to discredit it happening, I think maybe a way to make it a little bit more productive. I mean, we've invested a lot in this. I don't know what scale it's going to be, but if you can just kind of go at it with that, and so if you see something wrong, just don't tell me it's wrong. Tell me what you think you can move a little bit to make it a little bit better for you. Okay, because like I said, it's probably going to happen at some level. All right? So if you don't like the channel, say expand the channel by 5 feet or something like that. Does that make sense? Because I know people just don't want it, but that's, you know, that's not going to make it a little bit better as opposed to, it may not be all or nothing. Yes?
And a question, and this is for the advisory board. This is to do with, you know, the question about insurance if somebody gets hurt. The converse, since obviously we want at high tide, if possible, people to pass through, to, you know, use it as much as possible. If somebody harms the gear, how does I don't know how it's all set up. Is it vulnerable to passive recreation above it?
Can be.
Not more active recreation.
Yeah, more like a boat prop from a boat that wasn't paying attention, or a lure that snags a bag and rips a hole in it. I mean, I've had a bunch of issues like that over the years, but never really done much but grumble about it, you know.
Okay. So that's a risk that the farmers are
Yes.
comfortable with? Okay.
So I'm going to just take 2 more questions on the recreation part, and then the board will discuss it. Yes, ma'am?
Going back to the recreation and the shellfishing and the things washing up on shore, can it be proven with studies that things just go out to sea because up at Blaze Road 1000, a lot of things during storm section just wind up on Back Beach outside of my window. So I'd like to have confidence that that shellfish that does get shucked and whatever debris does go in there, if we can somehow put in writing or do a study to make sure that it does go out and not against the blades is a big concern.
So we're going to talk about cleanup as another item.
It is in the regs, the removal of equipment, that it's required, that if it washes up, that the farmer must go get it within a certain period of time. Otherwise, the town we would go do it and charge the farmer. But it's valuable material. I mean, someone's going to go get it.
And how do we report that? Would be something else that just big enforcement.
How do you report it?
Harbor master.
Sure, shellfish constable, yes.
Or the tags actually have, usually the tags have a name, address, and phone number of the farmer, and so you can call the farmer
And
directly.
will there be a certain timestamp on that turnaround?
There is a time stamp, there's a time on the regulations.
There's a time in the is it? I think we have 15 days, I can't remember what we
And is
decided.
it, while she's looking that up, is it
I'll look
possible-
for it.
Is it possible you have a valuable asset there, so you're going to want to get to that
Absolutely.
real fast
Yeah.
and get it back in the water?
In the 4-day nor'easter that we had, I lost a lot of seed bags, and I deployed a drone to go find all my stuff.
And continuing on that, how do you prove whose material it is if it's just washed or doesn't have a tag and there's multiple farmers?
Then call the shellfish constable, and then he would, you know, I guess the farmers would get together and say, hey, that's mine, or whatnot.
So it's on 8.9B, it says,
Yeah, it's-
gear, tackle, or equipment leaves the license area, it's 15 days is what it says in here. Yeah. Is that, I think we could probably suggest that
Tighten that
that
up
number
a
be
bit.
reduced.
Because we have a lot of little babies and dogs.
Sure.
Playing on what we call back beach.
Yeah.
And if there's broken shells and debris washing up, that's a huge concern for us.
Okay, so that's the washout, 15. Did you say 10?
7? What do
Or-
you guys do?
Was there a suggestion?
Well, it came from over here.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
7.
What do you guys think?
Well, what's reasonable, I'm looking at, you know, Mike as a constable, right?
10 days.
10 days?
Okay.
You have to consider resources that can actually get there, right?
I mean, if you have a couple of days nor'easter, I mean, you can take a few days to ramp up and go out there, see what's actually missing, then
Right.
go explore and find your stuff.
That's true. The storm has to be over to go get it.
Yeah.
And what if the only access is through your yard? Do they have permission to go through your yard to get it?
Absolutely not.
All right, well,
In 10 days it is.
let's, you
Well-
know, the constable might have an
Well,
issue if
a
it's...
question with that, a commercial lawsman has a right to walk through private property to pick up their gear. So,
Is that
So-
mass law?
Massachusetts law.
And does that apply to?
Probably doesn't apply to aquaculture, but for lobster gear, they have the right to go get their gear. retrieve their
Is there
gear.
mass law related to this as far as?
I'm not sure, I have to check. I know that
If you want it
state
removed,
employees,
then you want them to go
individual
down.
fisheries have the right to access any property, especially being in that business. But as far as a town shellfish constable or appointees, I'm not sure on that.
So I guess I'm confused, you want them to clean it up, but if it's up on your property, you
If they
don't...
come via the water to clean it up,
Yeah.
I think that's absolutely fine. As you know, the Glades is a large compound with lots of people and.
Yeah, no, that makes sense.
Yep, okay.
But also too, there's a sandbar there that is like almost like a barrier. So getting there to, at certain times, it just creates a challenge.
That makes sense.
So it's
Like
10 days?
10 days, yeah.
Okay,
And just if you can put in there access from the water only.
okay.
Unless.
Or by permission.
Unless permission is
verbal- Unless
granted.
approval is granted,
Yeah.
yeah.
This is for Briggs now, right?
Right, if somebody's got a big,
Written approval.
Okay, so this is the last question in terms of recreation. I'll give you your...
We just talked about the wash-up of stuff. There's a whole nother side of this, is the environmental damage that happens to the marsh when this stuff washes up.
Okay, that'll be coming up in the cleanup part, we'll talk about
Well,
that. So this is
it's
just
really
recreation.
important, Tony, because the marsh is a very fragile area, and you may do more damage to the marsh by cleaning it up and marching over there or using equipment to pull it off. The marsh is very fragile. It's disappearing as we see it now. We don't need to make it any worse.
So again, I'm going to say what I just said before. Give me the next step. So let's assume it's happening. What would you like to see changed to mitigate that a little bit?
What I'd like to see is the recreational use of the property maintain the same and no commercial fishing in that area.
Okay, so,
Me too.
but you heard what I said, right? Okay, so we're done with the recreational, the one
One more
is-
there's one more, Tony.
I just want to go on record as saying that some cost should never be a reason for continuing any project. And that's what you referenced. You said we put a lot of time and money into this already.
That's not why we're doing it.
That's what you said. Supporting your argument.
Well, it was more time. I mean, we've invested a lot of time and
That's
energy,
excellent.
and we want to
If it's not a
move.
good idea, then we shouldn't pursue it. That's why I just want to go on record.
Need an address?
Thank you. So recreationally, is there any other changes that the board thinks should go into the regulations?
think so.
Not
Yeah,
the
I think there's a
regulations,
lot.
but I do want to reevaluate,
The site?
yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
where the-
each site,
Yeah.
Yeah.
if we had multiple
Okay.
sites too.
All right. Moving forward. Okay, seeing as we started on the cleanup component, why don't we continue on the cleanup component? Mr. Graham, you were talking about,
Tony, when the storms come in, and they will, they're going to drive everything up on the salt marshes and force it into the channels, because the force is going to come and head right for that creek. And it may end up on the Glades back beach. But sometimes when you go in to fix something, you damage it beyond repair. And the marsh is so fragile that people shouldn't be walking over it, and you shouldn't be inducing any additional damage to it. And by having this, you said that the cages are going to be taken away for the winter, but the pipe system will still be in the ground. And when the ice flows come in, they're going to dislodge it, and they're going to be in the marsh right away. And you're going to damage the marsh, take them out.
so, again, let's say we're doing this. What are you proposing we do to minimize that?
There is nothing you can do to minimize it.
Okay. I'm saying that's what's going to help us change the guidelines to take your concerns into consideration. Because I don't know that the board's going to say, okay, let's throw the project out tonight. I don't think that's going to happen. So as you come up with concerns, come up with solutions, so we can get it in the guidelines.
So I just comment on that. I think the marsh is so restricted now that I can't even pull gravel that's coming from Glades Road out of the marsh because it's wetlands. And so I'm not even able to pull bad stuff out of the marsh right now. So what Bill's saying is that junk is gonna be probably 10 feet in front of my house, right off of Glades, and you're gonna have to go out and get it. So you're gonna have to ramp across, and I don't know how heavy this stuff is, but it's more that Glades seem to be, not Glades, the marsh is protected for everything. So if I can't pull bad dirt out of it, what's the
Conservation is part of the
rules that
permitting
say,
process.
oh yeah, but if we put tons of junk or whatever.
You can pull debris out.
Is that going to be okay?
We clean our runs today. We clean like down whenever we have issues down when the tide comes over. We're in cleaning.
Taking traps out all the time, but could
Yeah.
maybe
Could
Tom maybe?
or Jamie?
To clarify what the wetlands rules are about the marsh, is it going to be okay to go traipsing across that whole inner, where this Bass River area is?
I couldn't imagine this guy.
Is it going to be okay to go traipsing across that to go recover this stuff? And I'm just saying that I'm not allowed.
No, I think we get your question. Do you have any idea on that? Should we talk to Concom or?
Well, I know down in Hummerock, when the water goes over and it goes across the street, we are not allowed to put the machines on the marsh to take the stuff out of the marsh.
Right, you're not allowed to take the cobble out, but if there's
trash
metal
in there,
debris and trash,
You can generally go grab it, but we
Yeah.
can't put machines on it.
right.
Mr. Chair, maybe if we could just spend a minute just describing what the gear is, how deep what remains all winter is, I mean, what are we really talking about as far as physical stuff?
So, let me see if I can bring a photo up. This is a photograph of my farm in Dennis. You can see 20-foot-long PVC rack structures in rows. The PVC is driven in far enough that even in a 4-day nor'easter that we just experienced, with wind gusts up to 80 miles an hour for several days, and this is on racks that are fully covered with gear, we didn't lose a single rack. I lost a few seed bags, but it was because they were poorly tied down, and they might have gone maybe 300 to 500 yards. So as far as envisioning tons of junk up in the marshes, I just don't see that it's going to happen. You'd be a very, very poor farmer. So I and my oyster farm colleagues on the Cape and most farmers that I know try our best to be the best environmental stewards that we can be. I consider my business to be a sustainable business that can live side by side with recreation. It can be placed in sensitive areas. All along the coast of Massachusetts, Rhode Island, neighboring states, farms are placed in environmentally sensitive areas with marsh and conservation land. And it happens. People just take the necessary steps to ensure that we're not overly, we're not making a mark on our surroundings. That area there can get pounded in Dennis. It mimics this area very similarly.
So the question is going to be, what can show up there? So one of your bags can show up there, one of your cages can show up there, and it can get blown by a storm into the marsh.
But it shouldn't be tons of junk.
Right. If you're doing your farming properly, you're securing that stuff.
Correct.
Which, the first time we have a storm, Bill, you're going to come in here and say there's three things here, because it's going to happen.
It's going to happen.
It's going to happen. So, can they go in the marshes and clean up the stuff, I guess is the question. I would imagine they can. But I imagine it will have some negative impact on the marsh.
How big was that farm,
There's no
Jamie, that
farming
you
in the
just
wintertime.
showed us? Spatially, how many acres was that?
That was 1 acre. That was, we have 2, but that was 1 acre.
So that much gear goes in 1 acre?
Yeah.
Perfect.
It's 208 feet by 208 feet. You can see the person beyond me isn't using very much of his acre. The person over here in that corner over there, he's using quite a bit of his acre. He's using aqua trays. We're using primarily rack and bag with some cages mixed in. I wish we could see it a little bit better. The lights are on, so it's hard to see. But that is an acre, yeah.
Karen?
Does anyone inspect the farms as they're built? Just like we have house inspectors, does anyone go out and say, this has been laid out properly?
No.
This isn't going to, well,
No, but the license that is being applied for has to specify what you plan to use. I suppose the Shellfish Constable could be a set of checks and balances to make sure that you're keeping with your plan, with your license permit conditions.
right, well, just like we don't let people build houses without the electrical inspector coming up, the plumbing inspector, this is much more of a, there's much more stuff out there than I envisioned in my own mind. So my question would be, how can we make sure that these farms are being planted properly?
I mean, we could do early inspections.
Yeah.
Since especially the pilot, the
Yeah.
constable with.
Excuse me, just if you can keep the idle talk down.
But I mean, it's a good idea.
Yeah.
This is a new thing to Scituate, and to probably most people applying. It would be a new
Plus it's-
industry, so we should
It's a
set up
hefty-
some checks and balances.
It's a hefty investment, too.
Go ahead, Karen.
Oh, sorry.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. To keep the temperature down a little bit, if we can look at this as a pilot program and see how it goes, and if it doesn't go well, then we just eliminate it. If it goes well, if people are happy with it, I would like to say a couple things about, we are a fishing village. People come down to Scituate, they come to Cohasset to look at the boats, to look at the lobster boats, to look at the fish coming off the boats. So I don't think this is out of the realm of us. I recognize that it is impacting a part of town that has been largely not impacted by things like the wind turbine, et cetera, and I don't mean to say that this is the wind turbine. But my point is, if we look at this as a pilot program, and we take all the input we're getting, and try to figure out, can we make this work or not?
It's a very good point.
That was our intention all along.
It's our intention all along, but it's a really good point on the early inspections and this, and the comparing it with building safety and just.
It's in the farmer's best interest.
Yeah, it is in the farmer's best interest, but I mean, that is something that Mike's writing down right now.
Does the board
and
feel
thank you.
that there should be some sort of clause for inspection?
Absolutely.
Sure.
Okay.
Okay.
So can you add something there?
We sure can.
Yeah,
And to Mike's point,
application
they're spending a lot of money, so they don't want to see an investment
Yeah.
just get washed away either.
Will we have the funds to, do we think, given the data, we'll have enough funds to enforce that? And how do we actually implement that?
Well, I
We
think
charge it the way we do.
Karen's point, yeah.
The building inspectors, you know.
Karen's point for the pilot, I mean, it's going to be a limited number to get started with. I think we can probably.
We're going to need a
And
fee
actually,
structure,
in here, it
too.
does say, the option of the licensing authority, the applicant may be required to pay for legal and technical fees incurred by the authority in reviewing applications. Well, that's application, so maybe we
Well,
expand that to.
Maybe there's a fee for the inspector.
Yeah, okay.
Actually, can you
I
add
like
that
that,
there as
yeah.
well?
Mr. Chairman?
Just 1 second, sir.
Oh.
You're next.
Do you have did you have a suggested fee for that inspector?
Whatever it costs to have the
Okay.
guy go out there and do it. Karen, did you have anything else?
No, that's.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Just your name and address.
Robert Thorndike. I'm a
What is it?
shellfish farmer, 220 Gannett Road and 1000 Glades Road. The Glades on the backside, because of 2 sandbars, is a velocity zone. It has a migrating barrier beach. But the biggest issues that we have with the existing shellfish on our property is the Cohasset wastewater treatment plant. You said that this is going to happen. Are you saying at this location you have decided? So how are you going to clean up the Cohasset wastewater treatment plant and stop the use of the dumping of chlorine in Cohasset Harbor?
I can't tackle that one tonight.
Well, you can't sell an oyster that's infected.
Well, I think that's where the state will come in and say whether the water's quality is good enough or not good enough to do it.
I just have a question.
1 second, ma'am. 1 second.
I mean, to Mr. Thorndike's point, our job as the Board of Selectmen and, I don't know, authority for this would be to look at the rules and regs. It's not our job to decide if the site is feasible. As site-specific, our job is to figure out, have we addressed the concerns of the people this is impacting, which is a separate thing. But, you know.
But this would be the only site being considered.
The rules and regulations proposed would apply to any place that is feasible. So that's what we're trying to hone in on here. Honestly, if the gear gets washed up every year and the product doesn't work, the farmers are going to leave. So that's not for us to decide. I mean, that's my opinion on that.
Good point. Yes, sir.
I just wanted to say I agree with the point that was made about running a test or trial or pilot. My concern is that up until tonight, the pilot was being described as 50, and now it seems it's gone to 17.
We haven't decided anything.
I understand, but to me, a pilot or a test should be 3, something small. I mean, if the ultimate scale of this is somewhere between 28 and 30, 17 just seems like an awfully large number for a trial.
Good point. What's your name and address?
Oh, it's Phil McCullen, 18 Tilden Avenue.
So the pilot program, we did recommend 3 to 5 farmers for the pilot program. What you're seeing up there is 17 acres for the pilot program, and then we would pick out who goes where. So it is a pilot program that we recommended for 3 to 5 farmers.
And it's based on our resources. It's based on our resources, the town, okay.
The sense of the board may be 5 1-acre lots. We have no idea what the scope of it will be. Yes, ma'am.
So in regards to Ms. Conley's point about people enjoying the scenery and seeing the boats and the horses, and I grew up going to Selectmen Harbor, I love that. From this point in Briggs Harbor, where is the public access point where people would actually have visibility to this? And can we put that in writing of like where those designated areas are where the public could enjoy it?
She was talking bigger picture. She wasn't talking about this. In fact, John, you were saying something. How close is the closest house to the?
Well, why don't let some of the residents tell me? I was down in Glades Road the other day, and, Mr. Graham, if I could ask you, how far is it from your house to these farms?
About a quarter mile.
Yeah, I have to admit, when I was at the library at the last meeting, and Mr. Marathas spoke, and I haven't been to his house, but I was really under the impression these were 50 feet from your houses. So I had to go down the Glades the other day, through the gate, and I looked over, and I was surprised to see how far away they were. And I'm not saying some of you might live closer, but, I don't have any business on Wood Island Road, and if I did, I'd certainly look. But when I was on Glades Road, I looked out, and it was further away than I thought.
Directly out my kitchen window.
Right, but, yeah.
All right, so I'm going to try and zoom us back in on cleanup. Does anybody have any suggestions how to improve the guidelines for cleanup? Okay.
Mr. Gentleman to the left.
I'm sorry, yes, sir.
Is 10 days a long, it's an awful long time after the storm ends?
Yeah, I thought of that too.
It's a long time, sir.
Yeah, I'd be up to talk. I mean, you'd have to do it after the storm.
It's done.
So the storm's done. I would say, I agree with you.
I'd say a week, 7 to 8.
That's reasonable. I mean, even a few days, is.
Okay, can you change that to 7 days after the storm?
7, sure.
You have to determine.
Yeah,
when
but then
the
you have to
storm ends.
define a storm. Yeah.
I mean, it's
Get into the nuances.
It's over.
Well, there's no water there.
Yeah, well, the
No,
constable.
to access
wanted to
it, to
have-
clean it, you have to come by boat. So if you're going to ask someone to go out and endanger their life in a 3-foot sea so that it's...
Put in there that you don't have to endanger your life.
Yes.
Okay,
7 days following the completion.
I'll
of the
put
storm.
post-storm
Yes.
or something.
Okay. All right, so just cleanup. We're going to be here forever because I haven't even gotten to the hard ones.
Okay.
So cleanup, that's what we got. Granted, like Karen said, if we come back here after the pilot, and Bill, you say every day there's 20 traps in the marsh, then we'll reevaluate whether this is the plan we want to move forward with or not. And I think adding the inspection thing was a good idea.
Yeah. Thank you.
John, did you have something? Okay.
I do.
Okay, one last thing, ma'am.
Well, you've mentioned it several times, so I'd like to ask, I think it would be viable to put in a time frame for having that review of if this has been viable or not. I believe it takes 3 years for the oysters to develop. So if you were going to analyze the oyster quality, you'd need 2 to 3 years.
So
of
that'll
that
be in the
going on.
specific guidelines of the pilot,
Pilot,
I
not
think.
the regular.
Not the
Okay, just
guidelines for
throwing-
everything.
Okay,
Okay.
throwing it out there.
All right, so we're done with 4 of the 8. Now we'll get to the tough ones. Actually, let's talk about Cohasset. Anyone from Cohasset here in the room? About half of you, good. So what I think we have to figure out is what, is somewhere in the guidelines, my opinion is there's got to be some inclusion of the Cohasset community involved in this as well. I don't know to what degree, I don't know acreage that they, I mean, I know there's people in Cohasset, I don't know if anyone from Cohasset here actually wants to do this, or if you're just residents in the area. But there's going to have to be, you know, two groups working together in order to make this work properly. Any thoughts from the board?
The only thing that's really been brought to our attention officially is today about recreation. That seems to be the general concern. We've heard anecdotally there's been other concerns, and a little bit about the lobster impingement. I think we need to have a conversation with the community. I mean, I don't think the regulations are going to... I think that's part of the pilot, is how we be good neighbors to Cohasset. The regulations are the regulations, and unless there's something in the regulations...
Regulations restrict the use of this area to Scituate residents.
That would be the one.
So under 4.6,
The
C
applicants,
and D,
yeah.
the applicants must be Scituate residents. So those
Correct.
2 paragraphs could be amended to put language in that those paragraphs do not apply to any license or licenses that may be issued by the town of Cohasset. So if you carved out an area for Cohasset, the Scituate resident requirement wouldn't apply to those areas. The rest of the shellfish regulations would, but the residency would not. If that makes sense.
But if we're talking about regs, blanket rules and regs, can you, I guess, I see what you're saying on this, but the only place that this would be appropriate would be Briggs Harbor. I mean, we're not going to carve out something in the North River, where maybe we have a conversation with Marshfield, you know, if there's something viable down there. How do you, from a wonky standpoint,
We
how
have
do you?
had conversations with Cohasset, and they are interested in participating in this with us.
Okay.
We have not had any conversations with Marshfield. If Marshfield comes in and says, geez, we'd like to do some oyster farming, then we can come back and amend their regulations, they're not a bylaw, so the board just has to publish them and have a hearing. Cohasset has definitely expressed an interest in participating in this with us and having some area over there that they could use for their residents or their businesses.
So can you expand on that? So we don't have any official communication from Cohasset, though, with regards, we really haven't gotten to that.
No. I'd say it's official. I've had conversations with their town manager. I know the Waterways Committee has had conversations with their Harbor Committee.
Okay.
So, you know, it has been official communication, and as we talked about, the last meeting we talked about this, Cohasset has the access. So, they're just not gonna say, oh, sure, you can access away, and there's nothing in it for us. I mean, I wouldn't if I were them, so I think allowing us to have that, and then we would have to enter into an agreement with Cohasset as to the management, the access, and what they would have access to out there. That'd be
So in
Selectmen agreement.
those discussions, have you all addressed providing them access during the pilot or post-pilot?
It has really just been very preliminary at this point.
I think that's important, right?
Well, we can do it post-pilot once we know if it works.
Right.
So I think what Jim is suggesting is maybe the language in there that says only Scituate residents, that there's some sort of caveat in there that says that we can expand it to
Or
neighboring.
does that say the pilot instead of the regs? Can it be put in the
No,
pilot?
it'd be in the regs.
The regs, yeah.
So we don't have to come back and
Change the
regs. The pilot program, whether or not Cohasset has access to the pilot program, if you're doing a 17-acre pilot program, then I think Cohasset should have some access to the 17 acres. If we're doing a much smaller one, I think that's a different discussion. But a pilot program that's over half the available acreage, to just say, well, wait till we see if it's viable, then we'll come back and talk to you, I don't think that's working in cooperation with Cohasset.
We have, as part of the application process, they'll have to spell out how they're going to gain access. Is anybody coming from outside the harbor and coming that way, or they come in, maybe they have access to glades? So we didn't want to decide how the farmers got out there. That was for them to figure out.
Right. So does the board have the inclination to broaden the people who could apply for a license?
I would. To include Cohasset.
To include neighboring communities?
Well,
one second.
Why would you restrict it just to Scituate? I don't understand.
Just to Scituate?
Why would you? Do we have to restrict it to Scituate only residents?
No. No, I don't think we should.
Can this board grant a license to someone outside of Scituate if we change that regulation?
If you change
If we change the regulation.
Do whatever you want.
But right now, the regulations say you have to be a Scituate resident for at least a year or something, I think?
Yes, 12 months.
Yeah, for 12 months. Can I just mention something that we did discuss, and Sean might remember in the committee meetings, because it was brought up, a limited exclusion of residency requirement for commercial fishermen who have boats in either Cohasset Harbor or Scituate Harbor too, because we have Scituate Harbor fishermen who have a boat in Scituate Harbor but don't live in Scituate. So it would be so that was discussed at one point.
We don't want to limit it to, you could only be a fisherman to get.
No, I'm just saying, there was a discussion at that, and it was proposed
So
by a
does the
couple
board
people.
want to expand that language to say something somewhat vague, but saying that it could be inclusive to neighboring communities?
I don't want to sound like a snob, but we don't have enough. You have to, I would say, in this specific site, you have to limit it to Scituate and Cohasset. And Mike, the same as if we went down the river, I might say just limit it to, and I'm just throwing this out, maybe Scituate Marshall, maybe Norwell, because the North River goes up there. I don't think it's big enough to allow.
No, you would just say has the option to, and you could say up to 10% of the lots, or some, I mean.
I don't know if I'd put a number on it. I just, and I'm going to say this, some people might not think it's real popular, and I think I've said it many times. And I'm not just saying it because there's Cohasset people in here, and I know some of them. But it's important that you be a good neighbor, and I think we all think that. But I don't know a lot, but I know a little bit, and I've been down there enough for a number of years at Government Island. And if I were a farmer, I would want to be able to access the parking lot, the ramp, and go out Cohasset Harbor. Now, I asked some of the potential farmers if they could do it without going through Cohasset, and they said they could. But it, in my opinion, would be it'd be a lot harder to do. So I just think we need to include Cohasset right out of the gate. We may need them as much as they need us. The farmers may rely on Scott, for example, if Jamie's, and I'm just making this up, Jamie's out of town and Scott, a lot of communication goes on, David's out of town or something, and I just think it would work better.
For this site or for the?
For this site.
So I think for the regulations, which is for all sites, you would just have to have language in there that said that the board has the opportunity to.
The discretion to
To
extend
waive-
beyond, yeah.
All right, good.
Or to waive residency
The board
requirement.
reserves the right.
To waive the residency requirement.
Yeah.
When they deem necessary, or when they deem fit.
Perfect.
But I feel it would have to be an exchange for equal access to the available resources. Otherwise, you put the Cohasset residents who have applied and gotten a license in a better, foothold from a business perspective,
But I think, as Jim said, that's a conversation that has to have outside of the regulations.
Yeah,
Yes,
during the
absolutely.
licensing process.
So that would have to be an agreement between the two towns
Yeah.
that allow access to ramps and what have you.
Right.
You want to have that ability, because as Sean said,
I
we're going to have to work on
I
it.
just really, sorry, did I interrupt you, Jim? Sorry. What I do want to say, I obviously, we want to be good neighbors, we want this to work for both communities, can't be more connected than right there. But this was an economic development initiative for the town, and so as we go forward, certainly the preference should be to our fishermen, however we end up defining it, and our residents, because that was the.
So do you want to say?
No, I think the language is appropriate. It would be at the discretion that we would waive the residency. I think that works.
So the board reserves the right to waive the residency requirement.
Yeah.
I would just add another
Yeah, I think that works for
Okay.
the regulations, and
Okay.
then to this site, specific site,
Yep.
I think
You
we have
would say
more
that a
work to do.
majority of them, or 75% of them, have to be Scituate people.
No, I think you want to leave your options
Keep it
open.
broad.
Yeah.
I think regulation-wise, it's better to be flexible.
Yep.
Okay. Any other thoughts on that? Yes, sir.
I just have just a quick question on access by Wigmore Scituate. Are the lobster fishing now allowed to offload lobsters at Parker Avenue? Or can you offload fish at Parker Avenue? Because I think you're assuming we can offload oysters there. I'd just like to know if that's true.
That's one, I think, the memorandum of understandings that we have to enter into with Cohasset.
Because some of this discussion, if we cannot offload oysters there, what are we talking about?
Town pier.
Government Island.
Yeah, Government Island.
So Parker Avenue's out.
Okay, just a couple more on this, because we have some long ones. Yes, ma'am.
If they, Chrissy McCormick, Cohasset, if you have to access our town piers, what is, I mean, we have such limited space as it is for our residents and our fishermen and our lobstermen. What does that do for us if you people are gonna be using up our town piers?
Are you talking about parking spots with the
No,
cars?
unloading oysters and whatnot.
Right. That's up to their town.
You'd have to figure that out. The town of Cohasset would have to figure that out.
Well, we figure it out.
Irish mossing.
Sorry.
We're not calling you guys, you guys.
Irish mossing.
David, you're number one on my list.
I'd like to say, for years, there used to be a very large fleet of mossing boats. And I actually mossed. In the 60s and 70s, there were well over a dozen boats from Scituate and from Cohasset that worked out of Parker Ave. Lucia Russo used to come down Parker Avenue, and we'd unload our moss into the truck, and off we'd go to the proving grounds. There's got to be some harmony here between the two towns, absolutely. But, you know, Government Island is shared by both towns. I would say, I'm not exactly sure of the percentage, but it's darn close to 50-50 of Scituate residents that fish out of Cohasset Harbor and 50% of Cohasset fishermen that fish out of Cohasset. If they can do it, we should all be able to figure this out and work in harmony. And recreation and commercial works. It should work. We're trying our best to give some wiggle room as far as channels and, you know, it's a process. And it just stay with that.
Last point, Dave.
Yeah, just David Sinkowski, 20 Fox Farm Lane. Just remind everyone that this is a taxpayer-funded effort. None of the business models have even shown a breaking even, so if you're going to offer this to Cohasset fishermen or residents, then they should pay a higher fee. I'm not sure that the residents of Scituate should be funding their efforts.
Or the other way to do it is when you have a memorandum, you share in the costs of the inspections or whatever. I mean, there's a lot of ways to do it, but
As long as
it's a good point.
That should be in the conversation.
Two more. Tom, did you have something?
Just that's a common practice for shellfish licenses. Towns will charge out of town fee and a resident fee. You could do the same with your agriculture.
We do that
That will
now.
really be you guys. Yes.
Tim Davis, Cohasset. The two things that I can suggest that Cohasset community would like to see, one is an environmental impact statement. Is that in the plan before licenses are granted? That is?
The division, yeah, the Division of Fisheries does that.
Okay, that's number one. The second one is to do a study on how much of the water sheet would be excluded from sailing, particularly sailing, at what times. In other words, a 420, for instance, draws maybe 3 feet with the board down. So at what tide would that whole area be excluded from the yacht club, the sailing club, anybody else sailing over there? So those are the two things.
That's probably pretty easy to do, right, Jamie?
Yeah.
I think so, yeah.
I think
Do you think you guys could throw that together?
Yeah, we could do that.
Yep.
Okay.
In the summer months, you probably don't have to do that.
I'm off tomorrow. I'll go there.
In regards
No, I mean,
to that,
the analysis doesn't.
February.
Boats do use this area to access Cohasset Harbor.
they don't always use the channel to get into the harbor. So that does affect fishing and recreation. There are specific places that we were required to use this area as a channel, as in channel dredging. When the channel is dredged, we were told and required to go through this area to enter the harbor. So what will be how will we get around that? There are puddle channels, like there are low areas that seem to create a natural channel. Maybe we could take those specific areas and not allow the crates and whatever to be there.
That's what I've been looking for all night. Perfect. So can we make the channels that we're making part of these puddle channels so that if it does have to be used by something else?
I don't see why not. It's just a matter of,
Well,
allowing them to locate them here instead of here.
Not you, them.
Can we follow up with you to see where the puddle channels are?
Yeah, I think we have to look at that, because if the town's going to be putting buoys out there, the town's assuming a liability. So I think that's a huge issue.
Yeah.
Well, let's just look at where the
Yeah.
channels are
Yeah.
and see if there's a way to incorporate the deeper water.
Right.
And we can be flexible and follow up with you. Thank you for your comment.
I do have a question about the nor'easter you mentioned earlier. How high were the seas that were rolling through your beds that did no damage?
The same as everywhere else, we're in open
20-foot seas,
Cape Cod Bay.
20-foot seas will wash, they'll wash right over there.
Yeah.
Last question on the Cohasset component.
Well, it's more on just this access. It seems to be that, is there an assumption that primary access is going to be through Cohasset? And then if not, what are the other options other than going around from Scituate Harbor is not a feasible option unless you have a big boat. And so I'm just I'm not hearing, one of the things I'm concerned about is the parking lot in North Scituate Beach, that all of a sudden doesn't become, so instead of having.
The Minot parking lot, is that what you're referring to?
The Minot parking lot, yeah. So
Yeah.
because then that changes the whole environmental.
I don't think that would be
I don't think that's.
But I guess it's a
Can't really
common
put a
sense
boat
question
in there.
terms of this is a feasible business, that if Cohasset is out, that you cannot use Cohasset Harbor, how are the farmers going to access the beds?
It would be coming around. It would be, up to the farmers to come around from
So
from
that
Scituate
kind
Harbor.
of is part of the feasibility thing, that
Mhm.
you either have to work out the arrangement with Cohasset or.
Or the individual farmer would have to work out an arrangement,
Right, individually work
Yep.
out an arrangement.
which I think is more likely.
But as far as you're concerned, like that North Scituate Beach parking lot would be out of scope for this?
I mean, you can't,
It's a question.
can't put a boat in there. It's like a kayak step down.
One could
Paddleboard.
throw like a 12-foot aluminum, and on the outgoing tide, make it through the little narrow creeks there, but it would be, an emergency, or it wouldn't be a normal mode of operation.
Yeah.
Not with gear and stuff like
No.
that. I mean, you could throw a bucket and a pair of gloves and go out and do something out there that day, but.
Okay, now I just wanted to, so it's
Yeah.
either the government island or Parker Ave, or you've got to come from the ocean.
Or figure it out, or the farmer negotiate something.
In your experience, how big are your boats, and how do you access your?
I'm envisioning, 15 to 22-foot skiffs, flat-bottom skiffs, like a Carolina skiff.
To go from Scituate Harbor?
Oh, not to go to Scituate Harbor, yeah, I don't know what people would plan on doing there.
Okay, so it's kind of like, I just.
Right, not at this stage.
Okay. So, 3 things left. I'll go with fees first.
I'll take it for 800, Alex.
I'm trying to take the easiest. All right, so the fees, I think we've kind of beaten up the fees, right? I mean, the only new things that came up is will we charge an out-of-town fee and the inspection fee. So, can you incorporate, I don't know what the sense of the board is on the out-of-town fee. It's so nominal, it doesn't matter whether it's $100 or $25. But the inspection fee, we should cover the cost. If you're going to get inspected, they should have to pay.
We can include an inspection fee.
Any other fees, comments from the board?
What would be what would be an out-of-town fee? Would you add to one of the fees as an
guess it would
out-of-town
be the
rate
the
versus, because I think the
licensing.
suggestion was similar to like when you get a clamming license, you have like a out-of-town versus a resident versus a
So it could
senior.
be the annual reporting fees, we seem to have some flexibility on, or the application fee.
Well, I don't think state statute would allow us to charge a higher fee
yes.
for the grant. It's $25.
Right.
Right.
So it'd have to be the application or
Or the investment.
or the annual reporting fee. I'm really not, I'm not inclined to do that. I just don't think it's gonna be.
Okay, let's just, then you're saying just stick with the
I don't know. I'm
inspection
asking
fee?
you guys.
No, I agree. If it was a different situation, I'd say you could charge Cohasset.
No, we're talking 10 farmers, two from Cohasset, let's say, for instance, hypothetically. It's really nothing.
We want to see if it's going to work.
Right. Right, and I think it's part of a larger conversation of how do the communities work well together in harmony.
Okay, so fee-wise, just the inspection fee.
Okay.
Bill?
Tony, I heard earlier that the fees for this project could run up, not the fee, the money coming in could be up to $30,000. I don't know where the math comes, but maybe you can explain it. If you have $25 an acre and you're running 32 acres,
Pull that up, Jamie.
like $800.
So there's a $300 application
But
fee.
the application money is going to be absorbed in the processing of the application. It's a one-time fee.
Right, that's
So
accounted
it's
for.
not recurring every year.
Right, so go
part of the-
all the way over to the left, sorry, and all the way up, because we're at 27, line
But the fee is
27.
going to be absorbed by the town hall doing their work.
This isn't a profitable venture.
No.
Well, why are we getting into it?
Well, there's other benefits to it.
Such as,
Economic development.
Economic
They
development.
already exist in
cleaning
the water, so they're going to be doing the cleaning that way.
Grants the town,
Jobs.
few jobs, yeah.
More than just.
Heritage.
Profit shouldn't supersede natural beauty standards, I think.
I'm sorry, Karen.
Outburst there.
So, any other comments on the fees? Just the fees? Did you have something, the focus one?
Well, kind of related to the fees.
That means not really.
This
Go
is
ahead.
Donna Duncalf's back. Are these farmers going to be charged taxes for these business, or does Scituate get some of the income from this?
No.
So they
So they
pay,
pay no taxes?
To state.
I mean, they pay state and federal
No money to the
taxes.
town,
Just like every other
and
business.
They're using our recreational area.
How much do the
What's
kayakers
the
pay?
point?
Oh.
Sorry.
Subdue your conversation. Use your gavel, that'd be good.
So just to finish up on that, Scituate's trying to bring business in to get tax money, so that the residents don't have to pay all the taxes. So this is considered a business. Why would they not have to pay taxes?
To whom?
To the town of Scituate?
What tax? Property tax?
Yes, or whatever, yeah.
I mean, they'll pay their state and federal taxes as any other business would. There's just not property tax for the land.
But it's the town of Scituate. It's Scituate's
per acre?
land.
Yes.
And they're using it.
Yes.
Just like, say, Jamie's Pub, they have to pay taxes, correct? For their business.
Well,
Property tax.
Property tax, right.
Yes, that's what I'm talking about.
Yeah, because they own the land.
Right, so do they have to pay property?
They don't own the land, they're leasing the land.
Sales tax to the state.
Yeah.
So we get nothing.
Right.
This isn't, I mean, we've talked about this
Happy about it.
a lot about it. This isn't going to be a profitable venture for the town. We're hoping to have the expenses cover the costs associated with it. There's these other factors that we're trying to get involved in that have been mentioned. Steve mentioned clean water, economic development, creating some jobs, branding the town, and trying to get, other use of the water.
But the economic development is those people coming in to do the farm, but it's not bringing in jobs for the
Excuse me,
Scituate.
where are they going to sell their product? Where are they going to sell their product? Do you go to the Mill Wharf? Do you go to Oro? Do you go to any of these places? do you get lobsters there? Chances are pretty good you're eating his lobsters from Cohasset or Steve Whalen's if you go to the Mill Wharf. That's what we're talking about.
Yes, James?
I was going to speak to the fact that these farmers will need a place to store their gear. I mean, barring doing it on your own property, there's a very high likelihood that people will be looking to either rent or purchase commercial property, which then they would be paying commercial property tax. And say each farm employs between 3 and 5 people per farm. You're talking between 15 and 20 jobs, that you're now bringing to the town. Those people are buying lunches, they're buying gas, they're buying Monster energy drinks, like I saw somebody mention on social media. They're contributing to the local economy.
Your point is taken that this isn't a windfall of money for the town. Yes.
Okay.
All right. So I'm going to move on from the fees now. And I only have 2 left. The selection process and transferability. Sean, which one do you want to do first?
I have to leave right now.
All right. So we'll do transferability. So there's been a lot of discussion in terms of whether somebody that gets this license, this grant, to use this land, at some point in time can transfer that to somebody else. And from my perspective, the guy that has a license wants to be able to transfer it because he wants to be able to sell it and make some money. We're trying to make it a fair and equitable process, and there's other side of the people that say that anybody should have the chance to get it, and it shouldn't be monopolized by a certain number of people that pass it along. So, I don't know where we are. I've spoken with some of you about it individually.
No transferability in the pilot program.
So how do we want to start the discussions in terms of how we want this to be transferred?
I'll start with a question.
Transferable.
I'll start with a question of Tom, if you don't mind me putting you on the spot. So, it ultimately comes back to us. And I'm just, someone wants to transfer their license, in other words, sell it to someone else. We have the final say, Tom.
Yes.
If this board, for whatever reason, doesn't think that that's in the best interest for this town, and we say no, would that stand up?
I'm trying to think of any case
Situation.
law.
Yeah.
I'm not that familiar with things going to court in that regard. No, I can't. I'm sorry, I can't help you out there.
I mean, the reason I asked Tom that, I was hoping there would be an answer, and thank you for...
I think it would have to go to court, wouldn't it? It's not like there's an ABCC that there's an overreaching board they can appeal to, so they'd have to sue us to get...
In all the meetings we've had, we've talked about how it's related to liquor license, we've talked about moorings, lobster licenses, but this is a little bit different than everything else. And I'm going to say it, Jamie, but, the fear, people read in the newspaper, or they heard someone in Duxbury got $300,000 for their plot, and that's what the Dave Sinkowskis of the town would have a problem, everyone. Where's Scituate's piece to that, piece of the pie? We don't, so, once I'm dead against the transferability, and then I see what has to be invested and how hard someone has to work to make it work. And then that person wants to retire, person's on the list, and if this board, whoever's sitting here, has the ultimate authority to say yes or no, I might allow it to be transferred. So.
It's for you.
Yeah.
Okay. Karen?
I get to go next?
No, you don't have to. Anyone?
I'm fine. I'm, at least for the time being, against the transferability. I don't see how it hurts us at this point to not allow it to be transferred. I think we could change the regulations in the future if we wanted to allow it. But for the time being, I'm worried about the issue of fairness, and why would we have a waiting list if it isn't automatically, you're next in line? I just wouldn't even have a waiting list. Because the person who wants to transfer the license could transfer it to whoever he or she wants, assuming we approve it. I'm understanding. But it would be hard for the board, I think, to not approve it if the person that they're transferring the license to has the wherewithal, the experience, all those necessities that we would deem, that we would want.
We're gonna,
so
the board will talk, and then we'll open it up to you guys afterwards, so just...
So at this point, I would be against transferability.
Now?
Do you want, Maura, you go at it.
Oh, I agree with K2 over here. I think we have to maintain some control and, what do I want to say? It's late. Transparency with the lottery system as well. I get concerned about an entity just having that. I understand too that it does come before the board, but for future boards, not to put them in that position, I think it needs to be as transparent as possible. And if that existing licensee holder is going out of business or they're done, then it should go to the next person in line and not necessarily just who that person thinks it should go to.
I'm ready.
You ready?
So I have a little bit of a different take on this, because as Sean points out, it's different than moorings, it's different than a single piece of property. This is a small business. If we grant a license, someone is going to invest a few years to be profitable, and then for whatever reason, they want to move on. They've decided to move to Florida, and they have this going concern. The value of that small business is in the existing farm. It'd be like, selling mid-crop. Now, they could decide to, I mean, I'm not a fisherman, but I would assume you could decide to just deplete your stock, try to sell your gear separately, but I would think, and please correct me if I'm wrong, that would diminish the value of that small business. On the other side of it, to the point of what's the point of having a waiting list and having people go through the application process, assuming everybody on that list is qualified, I don't know if this is feasible, so I'll look to the experts in the room. It would be, to me, in the best interest of both the small business, the farmer, and the town, if there was I don't know how you would structure it. If you are to transfer, you must notify the first two people on the waiting list of the opportunity and open it up to make sure that the farmer has the opportunity to seek the highest bid, but that the waiting list it's not just a closed deal. I don't know if I'm addressing this right. I don't know if there's a way to split that, because I think that if you don't allow transferability in some form, and it could diminish the value of somebody's investment in their farm. And I'm not sure that that's what the goal of this is supposed to be, is to make someone start all over. I mean, they could, but if we're looking for economic development, I think has the potential of taking a step back. And that concerns me. I would like some more input from the people that know how this works more.
Well, keep in mind that the state's position is that any license, it's all public trust. The actual piece of land under the water, no one owns that. The Board of Selectmen has control over who has access to that piece of land, but no one ever owns it. It's the public trust. So what you're selling, really, if you're transferring, is all your shell stuff, all your equipment, maybe your contacts, your business, and the things.
And the right to use that area.
The two are two separate.
No, they're separate. You're not selling the right to use the area, just all the equipment, right, in the business.
And your shell stock or whatever.
Your boat, I'm not following, though. If you transfer all of your gear and everything without the grant,
what's the point?
Yeah, then there's no value. I mean, there's value, but not as a going concern.
Well, that person can... Sorry.
Go ahead, ladies first.
Oh.
Oh, because the big crowd, yeah.
Yeah.
Only because we're outnumbered.
You made me lose my thought, but...
I'll go first. Go ahead.
Well, what that means then, for me, is that person can sell that gear in his business to anybody that may be on that's lottery. I think that's important for us to protect that public trust. That's about the only thing that we have here that we're in control of.
I think your point was that the real value is the trust. If you don't have the license, then you don't have an asset and you don't have a business. And the trust is not the business owners, the trust is the town. So you hate to see, and this is kind of the, fear is probably too strong of a word, but we're not trying to do this so we can create a get-rich opportunity for somebody so that they can harvest a farm for a couple of years, create a $500,000 business, and then turn around and spin it and make, 8 times revenue, or whatever the heck the valuation is going to be for it, and then walk away. I don't really care if somebody comes back in and starts from scratch again. Again, this isn't a money-making venture for the town. This is all the other things, the benefit that it brings. And I'm leaning towards Karen saying, why would anyone get on the list if anybody could transfer it to whoever, or sell it to the highest bidder coming afterwards? It's going to be the first 10 guys, get lucky, they get it, and either they fail or they succeed. If they succeed, they're going to sell it. You wouldn't just walk away from it. And again, as Karen mentioned, this is the early stage. Let's be conservative. Let's be small. Let's take baby steps through this process and say, we're not looking for someone that's coming in here trying to grow a business and turn around and sell it. We're looking for someone who's going to come in, and harvest the land and create good product and hopefully make money on their own, but not make money on, not the end game, not selling it to somebody else later. Is kind of where I'm leaning. Any other comments before I open it up?
Tom, can I start with Tom?
Sure.
Tom, what have you seen in other communities?
Pretty much a lot of the farms that have stayed, the people haven't been able to access, have been...
From the outside?
Well, people passing on to family members.
Right.
They have or they have not?
Spouses, they have.
Yeah.
That's where a lot of the ownerships have maintained the board approval. And there's been a lot of complaints in the industry that they want to change that in order to make it easier for them to sell business. However, that's current state law pretty well dictates that it's up to the board to do as they see fit. Someone else getting in, a lot of the towns keep a waiting list, and if the board decides to keep it within the family, that's fine. That's what a lot of towns are doing. But if one comes up, no one in the family wants to take it over, they go down the list. And it is an issue for a lot of towns because there are a lot of licenses that are coming up because it is pretty profitable businesses in some areas, some towns. Do you think that's right, Jamie?
I do, yeah. Okay, so I'm going to open it up to the floor now, and then we'll comment after that. Mr. Murray.
Yeah, Rick Murray, 16 Collier Road. I'm a member of the Waterways Commission, but which voted on this, and I'm expressing my own personal views here. So I really want this whole situation to succeed because I think oyster farming is a really positive, could be a positive thing for the town. All the other comments that we've been discussing, earlier tonight, I think can get worked out to varying degrees of everybody's satisfaction and dissatisfaction, but I think those things can get worked out. However, I am dead set against the idea of transferability for the following reasons. Number one, the preamble of the agreement of the draft regs speak about this being in the town's interest and those sorts of things. And therefore, I think the control of the selection after the transfer or of the transfer process needs to firmly stay in the hands of the town. If the outgoing entity is going to be selling or picking the next entity, they will absolutely do so for their own best interests, which is great. If I was in that position, I too would be doing it for my own best interest as well they should. And their own best interest may not align with the town's best interest. In terms of them recouping their investments and being able to benefit from operating presumably a successful business, that's a compelling point. I can see that. However, I envision a scenario where they're on their way out, it goes to a list, the select board are the ones, as this gentleman here, Tom, just said, he said that other towns, they have, if the board wishes to give it to the family member, or if the board wishes to do that, it's the board It's not a current entity. Now, I do think that the outgoing entity could have the opportunity to influence the board by via a letter or testimony during the discussions of who gets that next one, and that's all fair, just like any other person can also influence that. And I would suspect that the board would find the outgoing entity's input to be particularly helpful, but it's advisory. The decision, in my opinion, really needs to stay with the board. Now, there'd also be value in their equipment. They're getting out, the next person wants to come in. That's where you can make your money, right? I mean, entity A is getting out, and the board's got to pick between B and H, between 2 and 12. Whatever the board picks, number 7 on that list or whatever, that's where there can be the negotiation, and that's where that person, the outgoing entity, can make some money when they're selling their equipment, which is presumably either in good enough condition to be attractive to the incoming person, or it's not going to be, in which case nobody's going to want anything. So I also think, and I am absolutely not talking about anybody in this room at all, but I think if you get into a situation where the outgoing farmer is really doing a big job of handpicking the selection, you're just absolutely opening it up for corruption, behind the scenes financial payments and things like that. It would be out of the public eye. It would not be in the public trust, and things like that. So I firmly think that this, particularly at this round, needs to be firmly and exclusively in control of the Board of Selectmen.
Can I ask a question? Sean? But we deny that, Rick. All right, so...
But what?
We deny that. The board has the right to deny that transfer.
You do. It does put, actually, there's one. It does, however, put a lot of stress on the board, a lot of burden of denial as opposed to burden of approval. And then it could be if the regs say that the outgoing entity has control or has the right to select the next person, and then the board overturns that, then it would end up going to court.
Maybe they could recommend something.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Well, wait, no, there's a really big difference there, Sean. If the wording is that the outgoing entity can recommend, I'm fine with that. That's very different than saying the outgoing entity is essentially doing the selection.
Just trying to find a hybrid solution, as Karen was saying.
And maybe it's recommend to an existing list, so that you don't have, you don't have the 20 people in the room that want to do it, and all of a sudden, they're selling it to somebody else that's coming in.
But at the same time,
That's the way we designed it.
It's in the brick.
It's in the regs.
Maura?
I just, with regards to the right to inherit, so Rick, I'm just curious. Any concerns there? I mean, it's actually stated, though, at the time of death. That's what this.
That's actually state law, Mass General Law, that it shall. So we don't really have any wiggle room on that.
So we're only
We could
really talking
expand it.
about A, B, and C here on an 8.6, right?
Yeah, 8.6. I mean, I mentioned at the last meeting, some towns have expanded the right to inherit, but what we've put under 8.7, A, B, and C is MGL.
Right.
Okay, just not to repeat anything others have said, if you went back 2 years ago and you were looking who was talking about aquaculture in this town, probably in this room there might be 2 or 3 people. And now everyone's involved. It's really changed in 2 years. Look forward 20 years. The value of that property may not even be related to aquaculture. So tonight to sit here and to award this or to approve these regs the way they are, I think is dangerous. And one thing you might consider is...
With regards to transferability?
Yes,
Okay.
because you're giving it, you're assigning it for life, all right? And you might consider a 20-year lease. At the time, the 20 years, you've had ample time to make the money and revert back to the town. The question is, or my point is, you don't know what the value of this property is going to be in 20 years. I hope we're around to find out.
Dave, it could go the other way. It could go, I think you're thinking it's going to do this.
Right.
You know, and it could go the other way. If all of a sudden the market gets flooded, something bad happens, you know.
I think your comments are very correct. I would add to this that there's been some comparisons to Duxbury, and Craig and I mentioned earlier, walked the area this weekend with a Duxbury farmer. And they did confirm, the second person to confirm, that the last farm to sell sold for over $380,000 for 3 acres. Duxbury is a machine is so much further along than Scituate will ever be, just because of its location and the way they're able to use some automation. So I don't think Situate's going to be like that myself, but still there is. I do believe there's considerable money here, and that's why people are fighting to death for it.
Other questions from the board?
Well, yeah, my other concern is that, to the issue of transparency, is that if we allow people to negotiate the selling of their business before we approve the transfer, we won't know what they sold it for. There will be rumors, there will be all kinds of speculation, and we won't know. And so because this is a public trust, I feel as though we should be open, and we should not encourage what, I'm going to use this term, and I don't mean it exactly, but a black market, if you will, some sort of underground market for the sale of the transfer of these licenses. I think it's a bad idea right now. And the other thing I will say is that I actually looked at some of the numbers in terms of acres and the amount of money that was being made per acre, and when you look at Duxbury, it's way off the map. But they've been branding themselves. They've been in business for 20 years. They are the behemoth, at least around here. And then you go down to some places, and they're making almost nothing.
Yep.
They're making $4,000 per acre. And it goes up to, I think Duxbury was like $84,000 per acre. So, you know, it's not that I think this is a make-money machine, but I just think the simpler we make it and the more in control of it that we are, the better off we'll be, at least to start with.
Jim?
So, I've been farming for about 12 years, and the only two scenarios that I could see where I, as a farmer, just personally, would intend to transfer a license would be if I were to transfer it to one of my 3 young boys or to a longtime foreman that has worked for me. And if those two scenarios are stricken from my ability as a farmer, I might as well not apply. Because what incentive do I have to bring my son out there and teach him the ways, and what incentive do I and all my employees have to do the best job that we can do, you know, on a daily basis? The majority of towns in this state and all states around us, as far as I know, allow transferability. And different towns and different states manage it a little differently. Some states charge for it, so there is more of a higher degree of transparency. I feel like we can find some compromise that makes it more transparent and that people, that keeps insidiousness at bay, whether it be through an evaluation of a business, using a prior 5-year business profit and projected 5 years forward, so that you can't sell these for $380,000. I mean, that's not ever going to be my intention. I mean, you don't have to believe me, for my word or whatever, but I just feel like and I get that the board wants to be conservative because this is a pilot program. I just feel that you may not get the same interest from the same people that have showed interest all along if we don't give them some incentive and some firm ground to stand on, okay? So if I want to not only farm the acreage out there, but buy some property, open up a restaurant, have a raw bar, have a facility where I can process my stuff more thoroughly, grow, expand, I can't borrow any money from someone if there's a 20-year cap on it, and I can only farm for 20 years and there's an end date. Or if I die, if I'm taking a flight to Costa Rica in 3 weeks like I'm supposed to, and I die on that plane, and that license can only go to my next of kin for a short period of time, and then it has to go back to I think there's such a there's so many different scenarios that if you close yourself off the board from giving yourself the power to make that decision, then we can end up in some really tricky situations in the future. I just feel like there's a way that we can allow transferability and not have it be nefarious. Even, I'll fight tooth and nail for some kind of enhanced inheritability. If we don't allow it to be to somebody, unrelated, I'll go all the way for allowing, transferability not dependent upon my death to, like, say, my next of kin or my wife. That's, where I'm at with that. And then I just want to speak to the list, the wait list. So we did structure it in our rules and regulations that any transfer would have to go to a pre-qualified list. And we were careful not to call it a wait list because it wasn't meant to be 1 through 10 or 1 through 15. It was like a pre-qualified list of all the applications that you folks received, and then deemed that all these people on this list were qualified at the time that you evaluated them to be to be able to farm the land out there. So that the transferability had to take place with one of those people on that list. So that was what we agreed on, right?
Yeah.
Did that not come through in the?
Under 8.6, right to transfer.
Yeah.
It just says, any licensee granted may be transferred with the approval of the licensing authority to an individual who satisfies all the required conditions.
Did we take the pre-qualified?
So we took it out and stripped it and made it MGL.
Okay.
At one point, we had it to the pre-qualification list.
Yeah.
And then we decided
Somebody's
to.
already been like pre-approved by you guys. So it couldn't be just from
stripped it
some
out.
guy who popped up out of nowhere. It had to be from somebody on that list.
Is the waiting list.
Yeah.
Right.
That's not
But it
what
didn't have to
has
be
made
number
its
one.
way in.
That was not the final, that was the second to final.
The way it reads now is
Correct.
the farmer picks, yeah, I got it right here. You want the farmer picks, and we get the final blessing, is the way this reads right now. And it also has the right to inherit language in here, which is upon death.
Excuse me.
Well, the inheritability is for a set time period.
Correct.
Correct.
She has a question on which rules and regulations are published online that she's reading from. Is that?
Yeah, I'm just reading, because the folks were saying that these were online and available for the public to read, and they're just very different.
Is there a version number at the top?
Or what's at the bottom, the date?
It's on SituateMA.gov.
What's the draft?
Draft 3/17/19.
Yeah, that's a different.
That's an outdated one.
That's a different draft.
That's what's online?
That's what's on.
I can check.
It's been dynamic. This thing's changed
Yeah.
quite often, so whatever you're looking at is not what's.
I'll take it out. I'll take it out. No, it's not. It's the one.
So, looking back into the limit and size of the grant, right? So the term is today 3 oh wait, I'm on acres. I was looking for years.
Leases are 5 years.
5 years.
After the pilot program of 2 years.
So you're at risk of not being renewed after 5 years.
Anyway.
You would have to be delinquent in some way not to be renewed. You'd have to be
Gross negligence.
gross negligence. So it will continue to keep going at every 5 years.
At 5-year intervals.
5-year
Okay, so
intervals.
there's no cap on the term.
Complied with
Okay.
some conditions.
I have sort of a legal question.
I'm done.
In terms of ownership, can a person form a corporation that includes their children somehow?
No, it's up to two. It's up to
Two
two.
individual
Up
people.
to two individuals on the grant.
So wouldn't you put your lieutenant, whoever he or she is?
My wife. We're on the same plane, I guess we can't drive.
Well,
See, the concern of the transferability isn't for you to make money. It's really to be fair to everybody that wants to do this. And I can understand your concern. This is your livelihood, and you've worked hard to get it to this point. But from the town's perspective, we're not looking for you to get a payday at the end when you want to sell it.
And that's not my intention either.
Well, it kind of is.
Not really. And the wait list too, by the way.
Not you, and again, I don't want to, it's everybody's. It's everybody's. It'd be mine if I did it, right?
Fair enough.
I want to sell it to whoever wants to pay me the most money. That's just human nature, and it's good business.
I like to think about this from a management perspective though, too. If you have farms, going back to inexperienced people who've never done it before, constantly, it's not really in the best interests of the state from a food safety perspective. It's not in best interest for management from you guys and from the Shellfish Constable. If you've got like a stopping and starting of commerce, if you took Island Creek and you made them go away tomorrow because of the rules and regulations that we create, say they did it in Duxbury, and they had to go back to a list, then no one's going to be able to afford, that number one person on the list is not going to be able to afford Island Creek's assets. I mean, all likelihood. So Island Creek all of a sudden tomorrow is just gone. You've got a massive hole in their local economy. I'm not saying that we're ever going to be the same magnitude as that with what we're creating here, but you could have something like that light, And if
let's stay on track. I mean,
it speaks to
you're
that,
making the assumption that the guy that's going to get the license after you is worse than you. He may be better than you.
They have to start all over again. 3 years of oyster growth, and it started from day one.
I mean, we just don't know that. So I'm going to pose, people have strong opinions, and I think it's great, but I need to know what to change here that makes it better. So you've all voiced your opinion. When I come back to you and I see people nodding, tell me what words should change that makes it more comfortable for the people in the room. And I know David had, actually, I'm going to go to David first because he had his hand up, and then if you want to speak.
I don't know the exact words. Dave Friedman, Oceanside Trail. I completely agree with Rick and Karen and Laura and you, Tony, too. And I'm against transferability. I want this to work. We're not in it for making money. It's a public trust. It shouldn't be a forever type of grant. And especially in this initial pilot program. And it's going to be controversial, whatever decision you make. It would be much easier to add the transferability than to take it away. So again, I don't know the exact words to put in or to take out, but it's something that, and we may lose some farmers because you're not going to invest whatever effort that they need to put in to make this work if they know that 20 years from now that they can't sell. Another comment is this is a very rare occasion. People are in this for a lifetime. And so I think David did some research down in Duxbury. It's rare that people get out of this business. It is valuable. We don't know if this particular area is going to be that valuable, but they're getting land for free effectively. And I run a business, and for a lot of years I paid a lot of rent, and anybody that runs a business here pays rent. We're giving them this business effectively. People are talking about major investment. Given the amount of money that might be able to make, the investment isn't quite as capital intensive. That's what I think. As people are making this out to be. Again, just to summarize, I'm against the transferability forever. I don't know about inheritability. I'm not sure about how I feel about that. So I don't know what words to exactly change, but certainly in this pilot program, as we get started on this, I think the wording ought to be that we are against transferability. Because it's easier to give it than take it away.
Did anybody else have a comment on this? No.
Tony, I'm against the transfer, and I think if the farmer decides to terminate his business for whatever reason, that license or grant should go back to the selectmen, and that the qualified candidates who have been pre-screened through the application process, their name should be entered into a lottery and drawn from the lottery to whoever wins the lottery gets the grant.
Any other opinions? Rick?
Just a small point to follow up on something this Dave said about this Dave in front of me. I actually disagree with my friend and colleague Dave Sinkowski about maybe putting like a 20-year cap on the time frame. Because subject to the heritability of MGL, which when I read it at the time, I forget the details, I was fine with. I do think if there's a family or an individual who's keeping this going for 20, 30, 40 years, more power to them, okay? And subject to the inheritability aspects of that, I'm fine with that. Terrestrial farming, we've got it goes, and I know they own the land and all that. I'm totally fine with just staying in those inheritability things. My only concern is from outside of that to another part.
Okay. Anyone else before I go back to Jamie? Yes, ma'am?
I agree with the lack of transferability. because from everything that's been said tonight, this is a Scituate project, and we were originally restricting it to Scituate residents and maybe Cohasset with the, coexistence. But I understand the idea of being able to transfer to your family. And so you with your sons, you're teaching them the business, you're tired, you don't want to do it anymore, and your kids should be able to take it over from you. So I do agree that within the family, I think it's reasonable, but outside of the family, I don't think it should be transferred.
I would echo all of these words, but if you go back to this, what's available on the public domain right now, it does say, at least what was proposed back in March, that per MGL Section 58, any license may be granted, may be transferred with the approval of the licensing authority, so you guys, to any person to whom it might originally have been granted. And then you can deal with the right to inherit in a separate section. So those are your words. Question.
That's not how it exists today. Let me read it, just so you know. It says, per MGL Chapter 130, Section 58, any license granted may be transferred with the approval of the licensing authority board, the Board of Selectmen, to any individual who satisfies all required conditions as defined in the town of Scituate's shellfish agricultural grant regulations. So it's changed. Yeah, it's similar, but it's different.
Well, the fear would be that I want to sell this, I tell my potential buyer to go get on the list, and then the following year, a transaction takes place, because now he's a pre-qualified person, but not necessarily one of 10 of you in this room that aren't going to get a license. Right. So that's...
And I would think if you've been on the list, you've been pre-approved, people that are on the list, in that scenario where you say a buyer wants to sell to someone, they put them on the list, get them on the list and approved, my thought is fair, and those that have been sitting and waiting and have been pre-approved should be the first ones to have a shot at it, as opposed to someone that just got their pre-approval rate.
That's a good point.
So you asked for wording?
Yeah, I'm going to let Jamie talk, and then I'll come back to you, Rick. So,
I was just going to thank you guys for your comments that I think helped, further that cause. I just wanted to point to, if you guys get a chance at some point to read a recent Cape Cod Times article from a couple weeks ago saying that the headline is "Shellfishing Gives Some Young Families a Reason to Stay in Wellfleet." And the entire article is pretty much talking all about that, about families raising their children on the farm, a huge part of the town's economy, and if it weren't for this, they wouldn't actually be able to even live in this town because it's too expensive, and it speaks to that, in the least, affording some way to allow it to stay in families, knowing that as it is, there isn't a whole lot of turnover, and it's,
Last comment.
Hi, Brian Kelly, Collier Road. And actually commenting upon what Jamie just spoke about. He's absolutely correct. There was an event down in Wellfleet where the Board of Selectmen were faced with a decision. There was a bunch of property that was on the market for $6.8 million, and they held public hearings to buy it for $2.2 million. The town was pretty much split, 50-50 for or against, and infloated $1 million homelessness donation, which actually, through Freedom of Information, was found out they came from Marjorie Walker, I believe her name was, who's a select woman on the Board of Selectmen. And the reason she did it is exactly as Jamie was saying. So if she hadn't done that, it would have been sold out from the company headed like them apples out of $6.8 million and blocked people from entering into the marketplace. So just reinforcing what you're saying, but the town had to come in and buy that land in order to preserve that.
How long are you going to be on the board, Karen?
I just said that. Going to be all much longer?
To honor the family business concept, perhaps transferability could be allowed to a son, daughter, or husband, or wife?
What does it say already?
I think that's already in there.
No, it's not, no. So can I,
On death.
that's upon, inheritability is upon death, and if what I'm hearing, we would change 8.6A to read, instead of to any individual, to immediate family member as defined in these rules and regs, which is spouse, son, daughter, mother, father, brother, or sister, so.
Yeah, I don't think anyone wants to kill family businesses. And
I
understand
completely
what you're
agree,
saying. So,
Question there is the wife a qualified person?
well, they have to be on the list.
Is that a statement about women?
Well, maybe that is an after-the-fact.
There are women in
You
this
have to
business.
then-
Did somebody smack him?
Sure you
Maybe in the,
If you allow it to go to the family, they should be qualified to run the
Well,
family.
that would be a point, they could hire somebody to run.
To
the
run it
farm.
for them.
If they lost a husband and they need that for support, they could hire somebody to run the farm.
Or if there's already a foreman on the farm as it is, you know.
well, or
It wouldn't be in their name, but they would be running.
if Jamie gets tired, which he will someday,
I never get to.
he will someday, and you want to transfer your business to your son or daughter, then the son or daughter, in that case of a transfer, would have to prove through the application process that they are in fact qualified to take on this responsibility.
Now, in Orleans, they've actually strengthened their inheritability clause to allow not only for transferability to family members, not only upon death, but also they've allowed it for minors with
a trustee.
mentorship
With a trustee,
program.
yeah.
Okay.
So, I mean, you could,
Need to change 8.6A.
8.6A and then to immediate family member on pre-qualified list?
Hold on,
or-
hold on.
No, I don't know.
I'm asking.
No, I'm just like, I don't think you want to anticipate that your 8-year-old son is going to be on the transfer, on
True.
that list. I think that would be an after-the-fact, if there were a transfer proposed to the board by the licensee to transfer the license to a daughter, a son, an immediate family member, then they would be required to
Stepbrother.
fill out,
Just kidding.
stepbrother and stepmother, to fill out an application and to be able to prove that they are capable and able to run that business.
Well, it does say who satisfies all required conditions as defined. So that is in
Exactly.
there already.
So it would be Board of Selectmen discretion ultimately.
So conceptually, does the board want to make it transferable to family members, immediate family members?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Hey.
Yes.
You'll have to put a
Progress.
definition, then into definition.
Yeah.
The
The definition of
immediate family
immediate
member.
family is in MGL, and it's also in our rules.
Okay. Does the board want to make it transferable to anybody else? Is anybody, I don't see,
Well,
okay. Just
I
know
thought-
that
I
these are
thought-
guidelines. We could change, another board can change this at any time they want, you know, and review it. This is just, again, the starting point for us. As I said earlier, let's go into it conservatively and figure out what this is all
yeah, no,
about.
I'm
and
just so
then
tired, I can't even think.
Your votes don't count.
I know.
Okay.
Do you want to make it transferable to someone on the waiting list?
That's what I was thinking, if it goes,
Well,
we have
it
to
wouldn't-
designate the lottery.
Like, is it transferable, or do you just give it back and we give it to somebody on the waiting list?
Yeah, that's what you do.
Right, I think that's,
And that's,
Are we required to do
that way
so?
there's no collusion or anything to say, okay, I'm selling it to Jimmy on the list.
other than family member.
Correct.
Other than family.
Immediate family member.
Right.
Yeah.
I asked, I mean, this is an economic question, maybe a legal question. It's about the financial side of this, like when you sell a piece of property, I forget what the percentage is, goes to the state, right? Is there any precedent, I think Jamie mentioned some other states, I don't know about Massachusetts or whether we can run up this hill, you know, if you sell it for $1 million, the town gets 10%.
No.
No.
We can't do that.
We want to do it, but we can't
It's
do
not
it.
law now, but.
We want to do it.
Let's work on that.
Call your legislator.
There is no cookie hidden for the town.
Yeah.
Okay,
That was a big
so,
shock.
so just so we can get the wording right, so it's really only transferable to an immediate family member, period. Otherwise, it comes back to the board, and the board gives it to a qualified person on the list.
Well, qualified family member, subject to the board's approval.
Right, like, yeah. That's Karen.
Yes.
It's on,
Well,
that's
it's-
all already.
Who satisfies all required conditions as defined, yeah.
Yes.
So if we were to.
This says you can transfer it to somebody that satisfies, the owner, not the owner.
She's changing it. Right?
So if I'm understanding correctly, we're taking out to any individual and putting to immediate family member, and then keeping who satisfies all required conditions as defined by the town of Scituate subdivision. So I'm only taking out any individual to immediate family member as defined by, and everything else remains.
Whether or not.
So could you reread that, Susan? What if you just drop that? So you're just dropping to any individual.
Yeah, right?
Right, and adding
Immediate family member.
as defined here.
So you'd still want B and C, because you'd still want them to have insurance immediately, and then you'd still put them in a renewal cycle.
That's what B is.
That's what B is, the renewal, right? Within 2 years, you renew it, so that just puts them in the renewal cycle. And C, so apply to the transfer of the renewal thereof. What is that? Transfers are applicable to the original issuance. So it's the original license, it's not a new license.
Right, however the initial license was issued, those are
Correct.
the rules.
Sorry, I misspoke on the
Yeah,
C.
no, that's a hard one.
Whether or not so transferred, maybe within 2 years before their expiration. It's then current.
So whatever rules and regulations were in effect about the license at the beginning,
Is C.
yeah, would apply.
Typo.
And B puts them into a renewal cycle.
Read that.
Read, what am I reading? B. Whether or not so transferred may, within 2 years before the expiration of its then current term, be renewed from the expiration of the original term. And it sounds a little jumbled because it's state law.
Because it sounds
Sounds
like
like a
another
lawyer wrote it.
This is like,
It's translated from another language.
you can totally tell what the MGL stuff is because it's not as,
What does it mean?
we speak a little more plain English
So-
here.
May within 2 years before the expiration.
Of its then current term be renewed. So you're transferring in the middle of a term.
Right.
So
Read it backwards.
within 2 years of the expiration, be renewed.
Get to.
So does that mean within 2 years that you can get another 5-year term?
You can
Yeah.
renew, yes.
At the discretion of the board.
At the, everything, yes, at the discretion of the.
You're basically saying you want to approach the board before that term is expiring and say, hey, I'd like to start the process of my renewal right now. Isn't that kind of the gist of
Yes,
it?
yes.
Tom, is that how you read it?
Of course, it made a little more sense the way I just said it than it is written in.
Yeah, and A is clear on the Board of Selectmen. I mean, we could add,
Yeah.
Okay.
it's all the licensing authority.
Yeah.
I have one final question on this
Those
before we
should say
close,
proceed.
turn the
That
page.
should say pursue.
How would one
pursuant
start a
to Mass General
conversation?
law.
I just wanted to try and get the board's take on how you feel about, in the future, a working farm has been in place for 25 years. There's been a particular person working for the person who has the license for that 25 years. They're pretty much the foreman. They've been running the farm for a long time because someone's getting tired. And the children don't want to take part. Where's the value in not rewarding that person who's worked for 25 years? And I get the fairness aspect, I get the wait list, and people have been waiting in the wings, but maybe they've gone on and become a dentist or whatnot. What's the value in not allowing it something to transfer to them instead of somebody in a lottery? You know, not taking into account any money exchange, just literally the transfer.
Wouldn't
Like, would that conversation ever be able to come up, do you think? I mean, do you think that would ever be?
How does the 2 people on the license come into play there?
Well, what if, I mean, say it's I and my wife, because it's more important to me that it stays in my family ultimately than it is to be shared with the foreman, because I'm not going to get into the way I run my business, but the people that work for me have a lot of incentive in other ways.
But let's say I'm down that path.
Yeah.
If I put my foreman on the,
Yeah, I think you could.
Typically, most people put their family members on, because that's the safest bet.
But what's the mechanism?
Relationships break down.
Change the license names midstream, or does a new person on the license under the regs have to be?
Well, that's a transfer,
That's a
basically,
transfer.
so that's exactly what we're talking about, is a transfer. And I guess I was just trying to bridge the subject.
On a license.
Why don't you just have them get on the waiting list and apply?
You could, but then it would be a lottery, it would be like it would be a
Well,
1
we
in
didn't say we were
10
going to do a
chance.
lottery, we just,
Okay.
if they're that person, they've been on there, because I thought one of the residents brought up a great point, why do a lottery if someone's been sitting in that list for 15 years, someone comes in, has only been on it for 2, that's not fair.
Exactly, that's,
So,
yeah.
we never
lotteries
put
are-
lottery in here.
Okay.
Yeah.
So if there was a pool, and you guys were choosing from that pool, then maybe they would be a part of that pool, and maybe they would be the most attractive person to transfer to.
In a practical world, though, wouldn't it more likely if somebody's been with your family that long,
Yeah.
you would transfer to your disinterested son and let them continue working the farm? Is that something you guys would work out?
Yeah,
I mean, it doesn't speak to the transparency, but
right.
there's also presumably no sale, I would think, but I don't know. I don't think we can carve that out in a manner that
But it
would
sounds
be-
like there might be a place in the future for a scenario like that, where you're rewarding somebody who's actively and organically been working for something, instead of for somebody who's been waiting on a list,
But that's up to you to reward them, not the
Yeah.
town.
Yeah.
Well,
I
I
don't mean to be
can,
mean, but, right?
well, reward them by like giving them the ability to keep going. If I want to get out and they can't have it transferred to them, if I'm done, if, say I wanted to move to Florida, I have to stay in town for, the length of the duration that person that I'm rewarding is working for me.
Or you could adopt them.
Hey, good points.
You could.
So just one,
Write that down.
why are
Write that
there
down.
2 people on the license?
There can be up.
Why?
Up to
What does that do?
Sometimes.
It
My
just-
husband doesn't run off.
But doesn't that just create a loophole, like, okay, you and I are gonna go in it together, and
I'm dropping out and.
I'm dropping out, and you...
It's a partnership, it's typical, I mean, in Wellfleet, you can have 4
There's
people on a
4.
license. In Duxbury, too, we measured this by looking at all the
Yeah.
other available rules and regulations and found that
That
it was
limits the corporations.
quite standard.
If you have
We
a
don't allow corporations, though.
Right, we wanted individuals, not corporations.
Yeah, I mean,
What's the 2, Craig?
well, there's your business partner, right?
Yeah.
Right. I think we've done that, so we just have one thing left, which I'm sure will be the quickest. The selection process of who gets the licenses
Yeah,
to
I see
begin.
why not. I wonder if it's, yeah, what am I
Just a question, you're talking the very first time.
Yeah,
What
that's-
section is this?
And I guess it will also be
Talk about
after the pilot, just because once then it has to be transferred.
Let's address the pilot first, because are you starting from 0 at the end of the pilot, or starting fresh? That'd be,
I would say no.
right,
Can't
I
do
hope
that.
not.
Right.
So we pick the pilot people, and then, so let's say we pick 5 people, just one number. And then after that, it goes to 20, and then we have to pick, 5 more people to make it 10. So how are we gonna, what do your guidelines say?
A merit-based application process.
Yeah.
Criteria,
Has
minimum
an-
requirements.
Yeah, I mean, I think we have a business plan in there, which is common. Here, let me,
And they would be graded by the Shellfish Advisory Committee and pushed forward to the Board of Selectmen for the ultimate approval.
So right now, this
Based on our
board
recommendation.
picks who gets the license.
Yes.
Okay, so and I think, maybe it was Dave that mentioned it at one of the meetings, maybe that shouldn't be a board thing, maybe it should be a random thing. Maybe it's just put the names, qualified people in a hat, and you pick 5 names.
What are you talking about?
It's unusual.
Which board? Advisory board, or?
Well, somehow they're gonna be ranked. They're gonna provide a bunch of information, and they're gonna look at it, we're gonna look at it, and we're gonna see who's qualified and who's not qualified. And then all of a sudden, the 5 of us get to choose who gets a license per this. Which, I don't know, I mean,
Is the license information public information on the application?
Yes.
Do they have to provide
It's a public
financials?
hearing, yeah.
I'm just
we
asking.
have to put it in a,
Reading it.
yeah.
Oh,
Yes.
sorry. I didn't
It's
read.
all public, and we have to keep a record of it and put it in a book.
So I guess it's the board, this isn't really, you guys have recommended the board select it. I think from the five of us, how do we want to select the people? Which is kind of cool if you're up here. But, or do we want it to be a different process, random, some sort of ranking? Is it levels of qualifications?
We talked about that, but.
Would we do ranking?
I mean, we're trying to.
Random, we
do this
felt,
whole-
was not, knowing that this area out there is not for your novice farmer, we stayed, and the fact that most towns don't do a lottery right off the bat when they're starting something like this up, we stayed away from that and went with giving the town more control over who's out there.
Yeah.
I get that. And
Yeah.
so what do you guys think?
You have to rank them, but if you're looking at the information, they don't have to put their names on them. I think all of us will know who's who, pretty much, even if they didn't have names on them.
I wouldn't. I wouldn't.
All right. Then I might just say rank them, and I might remove myself, because I think no one would have to put their name on it, and I could tell who they are. And I don't know if that's fair or it's good. Maybe it's good for the town, but I'd have a hard job picking one over another. It's I think, like Tony said, once they all move forward and they're all capable of doing a good job, then
And maybe
I'd step
the
aside.
initial is a lottery, yeah.
So the regulations is written now, the Shellfish Advisory Committee reviews the applications, but we do
Correct.
not have criteria under which you would review
We
them
have
yet.
not done that. We would have
We would do
criteria.
that. We would-
We would have to do that, but that would be the next step.
We've been dealing with matters of general policy. And
Oh,
at
yeah,
this
yeah,
point,
yeah, but the way-
And at that
design-
point, anybody who would apply, it would be like a second step with a committee that is, everybody would not have an interest in it.
So, but the regulations as proposed.
As proposed, yes.
Applications are submitted to advisory, to Shellfish Advisory.
Yep.
Who, under some set of criteria, now reviews and recommends applications?
Exactly.
Applicants? To this
Recommends
board.
to the board.
Okay.
There's precedent for this in Falmouth, too. In Falmouth, they've recently done something where they developed a criteria by a point-based, merit-based system.
Yeah, there's many other
I'm gonna ask
towns have done that.
You just to stay out of this conversation
Sure.
a little bit, only because you've done so much, you've done great work. I just don't want it to get tainted. I know.
I'm going to have to resign anyways when it
Right,
comes to next step, so.
Yeah, I mean.
You're right.
But yeah, keep going.
Under that process, I think we should consider inserting the language that says the board will approve the criteria.
Yep.
Like, you guys can develop what you think makes sense because you're the experts, but I think in a lot of the like when we do contracts and looking for vendors in other areas, there are, many of the departments do a weighting system that says, okay, you've got X number of years, that gets you 3 points, you've
Yeah.
got, whatever. That's impartial and measurable and you can recommend that we would have the authority to approve. I think that would be a useful improvement.
Yep.
And then in that
Good
case,
way.
we would have ranked recommendations to this board, which would be in a measurable way. That would be my suggestion.
It's a good
Good idea.
process. Any other thoughts?
I agree with
I
that.
mean, I think what happens there is the people that are already doing it have a huge leg up.
If that is the criteria that we put the most value in, yeah. But we would have to have that conversation. We don't know that, what the criteria is yet. We might say, I'm just hypothetically, we might say, we really want to encourage young fishermen in Scituate to engage here and stay in our community. And we give that 5 points if they're, I don't know, I'm just making it up right now. We still have to vet that. But I think that gives us.
I like the idea.
Yeah.
I just think it's swayed a little. It's going to lean there's going to be a certain category of people that apply that are going to have a huge advantage over everybody else.
And should they? Because it's a complicated farming. It's not,
I don't know, should they?
I don't know. I think we can incorporate a weighting system in the regs as required without having that defined yet.
Well, we could also say, we want so many people at this level and so many people at this level.
Yeah, but that's up to the board.
Yeah. Any really quick thoughts from people out there, Brian?
Yeah, just echoing what Sean was saying, one of the problems that the Waterways Committee, when we reviewed this, saw was the potential conflict of interest. And a recommendation that we had come up is that anybody who's applying for a license shouldn't be grading or rating applications.
Right.
So-
Absolutely.
Good point. Okay.
Agree.
2 quick points. So the rules and regs that you have today, as you mentioned earlier, have gone through many iterations. Just 4 weeks, in August rather, they included that the Waterways Committee was also reviewing these and giving recommendations on who should be on the ranking. We determined that that was definitely a conflict of interest, and we asked that our board be removed from that process. That same conflict of interest exists today with the Shellfish and exists today with the Board of Selectmen. I don't see how you can have this and not be affected, as Sean had mentioned. And one last very quick point, and it's only for the members who weren't at the earlier meetings at the Shellfish and the Waterways. The concept that I raised was if the application process is rigid enough that you would only be receiving qualified applicants. And that's what I was pushing for, that, and this application process hasn't even started yet, as Susan mentioned, but it would be my hope that that would be very rigid, and then you would only get qualified applicants to do a lottery fund. Thank you.
Somebody else up there? Scott, sorry.
Is there a insinuation that there are going to be more applicants than what there is space available for?
I think so. Last time we were at a meeting, we had people raise their hand, and there were well over 25, I think. And the pilot program is probably going to be much smaller than that.
15.
And who knows what
15 about. It was 15 that raised their hand at the Waterways.
That was then.
Could I ask a question to clarify? You said something about that this board would not be able to be...
I would say that any board would have a problem with that, because as Sean had mentioned, you
With
can
what?
remove the names, and for the most part, when you read their resumes, you've been through none of these meetings, the qualifications are obvious who you're talking about. I could pick out Jamie, his resume from a mile, or other people, because we've been working together now for 4 months. I don't mean that in any other way.
But that's why I asked, Mara shook her head and said, no, I agree with you, I couldn't agree more.
That's not a conflict of interest.
That's not, I completely,
Yes, contracts are awarded all the time by the Board of Selectmen.
So if you
I
know the
spend a
person
lot of
and-
time
Okay.
awarding
All right.
contracts.
I don't think there's any way to be on the Board of Selectmen in this town without knowing people in town.
Yeah.
But,
But he has a good point. But I agree with you.
But you
would never voted in if you didn't know
Set
anybody.
of definitions,
Yeah.
as
Yeah.
opposed to you might be biased because you
Biased.
went to school with them, you grew up with them. Having a bias is not illegal, having a conflict of interest can be. So it's just the
no,
terminology.
I think we're always asked to make decisions that, some people are going to be upset with you, some people, we just went through the whole sewer situation down in Cedar Point, and did I know some people down there? I did. But did it make me make the decision I made? No. So I would hope that we are elected to be trusted, and that there will come a point where we will know people, but if the criteria are strict enough, we should be able to make a decision. I'm not in the lobster business, I'm not in the fishing business. I'm sure I must know someone who is, but at any rate.
Howie?
If the criteria is strong enough,
Right,
I agree with
right.
that, then why wouldn't you just do a lottery? If everybody's equally qualified, why wouldn't you do a...
Well, I wouldn't assume that everyone is equally
That's a great idea. I think that's
qualified.
sort of,
Well, I think everyone's not going to be equally qualified.
I agree.
Everyone will hit a minimum threshold.
Right.
But there won't be, everyone will not be at the same level.
How are you going to determine that spread? You've got to have a baseline, you've decided that this is the criteria, put the names into the lottery, and
maybe it's years. I think a lot of that can be addressed in what Karen had brought up earlier, Howie, which is creating that that measurement, that scale, what do you call those things again?
Matrix.
Those matrices.
Yeah.
The matrices.
Did you decide that later, whether it's going to be a lottery or weighted?
Well, that could be a decision that the board, it could, right now, we could leave it the way it is, that it's in the hands of the board, and then the board would have to decide how we want to do it. I think what we should do, though, is, right, that it does say that there's going to be a review process by people that understand it, and there'll be some sort of system coming back to us with Karen's comment on the criteria that the board sets. And there may be, like I said, there may be different reasons to pick different people. You know, there may be 10 farmers that are doing it right now that apply, but we may want, like Karen said, someone who's a small business person and a young kid in town that's been working on a fishing boat for 5 years or something. I don't know.
I think to your point, I mean, there has to be a minimum threshold, obviously. Are you qualified at, and you get 25 points, you're qualified. But then we will have to have that conversation about above that threshold, what that criteria looks like. And I think the pilot program, of course, you're going to want somebody that's going to be successful in it.
Rick?
Key points I've heard, Rick Murray, 16 County Road. Key points I've heard are non-conflicted to Karen Canfield's point about the criteria are decided by the Board of Selectmen on advice from whoever they want. I must disagree with my dear friend Howie. I do completely support the board's discussion about how there's a minimum criteria, but not everybody's going to be equal above that. There has to be the minimum which you can set, but I don't support a lottery because there's a lot of things in here that can separate many different, all above the board, above quality.
A couple more comments.
Just a quick point. Just a quick point. The language in there also states that from time of application is a 60-day time frame. So just the board be aware of that it's currently 60 calendar days for you guys to render a decision one way or the other. Or defer, but you have to take some action. So I don't know if you're going to change it to business days or what, but
that decision can be extended.
So it can be extended, and that would be a part of whoever's managing. If the Shellfish Advisory were managing this, we would make sure that we do not pass the deadline and have it get extensions, but that is MGL, again. 60 days.
David Doffney, Flat Road, Scituate. I think in the beginning stages of this pilot program, you perhaps want to look at if you're using 5 different growers that have 5 different strengths. We want this to work.
Mm-hmm.
And if you have 5 of the same people involved in it and it failed, it could be failing because of somebody not thinking outside the box or trying something different to make it happen. So that's the bad part about having a lottery is you can't control that type of selection, and you want everybody's strengths. You want strengths maybe in access, work, people, family, all of those things, and I think that's where you want to start off with, and then from there, and again, we've talked a lot tonight about oysters and oysters only. This place may not grow oysters, but it may grow butter clams. So we don't want to box ourselves in as an industry or as a business into one thing and one thing only. We want to try different aspects of this. We want to know if razor clams are going to be good. Something different. You can't all grow the same thing and expect to make the same amount of money at it. So I think the oysters, yes, there's a lot of talk on that, but let's broaden that out. Maybe somebody has a better experience at something else that may work there, and it may not work for the oysters. So just a thought on that.
Any last comments from anyone in the audience that's lasted the whole meeting?
Tony, I heard tonight a lot of comparisons to Duxbury. We are totally different than Duxbury. Duxbury has a barrier beach that protects their inland bay. They have 3,860 acres of area that they can put their farms in. You're looking at Briggs Harbor, which has about 50 acres, and you're trying to squeeze 32 plots in it. And in doing so, you're taking away a right that the people have had for years, which is the recreational use. And no matter, you're either restricting it or you're taking it away in total. And the environmental impact is really something that I don't think the board has considered. I haven't seen any impact study that has been done by anybody, and I think you're jumping the gun on this.
Well, Bill, the only thing I'll say to you is, and I think I speak for everybody here, we're going to start out slow. It's going to be a pilot program. There's not going to be 31 lots out there. There's going to be a much smaller number to start and see if it's successful or not. And then we'll take steps from there. And the public will be involved the whole time.
Will there be a separate hearing on Briggs Harbor?
There will be a separate hearing on the pilot program.
Thank you.
Yep, ma'am?
So I am concerned about the environmental impact statement, because it does feel like drafting regs in advance of even having done the work to have evaluated the environmental impact. I mean, it's a wetland. So what is the timing on that vis-a-vis the pilot program? Because I looked
believe it's the
at
next
the
step, but
website.
who's best, Tom?
Tom Shields.
Right. We do go out and assess that, and we get a request from the Board of Selectmen to consider licensing a particular piece of property under the border. We go out to our biologists, and we have set criteria that we're surveying for. Most, first and foremost, are the shellfish, and if there's a threshold that who we have, and if there are commercial or recreational densities of shellfish, we wouldn't allow them. I know that there's been a preliminary walk on the area from one of our biologists, and it looks suitable. But we also assess other fisheries and other areas that we're concerned about. I know that there's been someone's been expressing concern about impacting lobster fishing. We have to consider that. But yeah, we look at it, and as far as the actual environmental impact, we're looking at what impact will shellfish farming have on the existing resource in that area. Does that make sense?
So does the Massachusetts Wetlands Commission get involved?
Division of Marine Fisheries.
Okay.
And that's where Tom's from. I don't know.
That's where I'm from,
Okay.
Division of Marine Fisheries. It's our responsibility to survey. And then, in addition to that, before licenses are issued, there's multiple agencies that the permit holder has to get licenses from, including the Army Corps of Engineers and a whole bunch of others. So the Conservation Commission has a say in this as well, for your local CONCOM agents. So multiple levels of review.
Yes, sir.
As a shell fisherman, and I wanted to second what Mr. Doffney said. He comes from a famous line of lobster fishermen in this town.
Famous.
They all look alike. At any rate, in Maine and in Wellfleet, I have farmed quahogs, what they call mahogany clams, and oysters. So I don't think you want to rule out any clam species as well.
I don't think we are.
No, we aren't.
No,
Not at all.
these aren't, they're very much inclusive of all species.
It's just shellfish.
Shellfish.
Aquaculture.
There are steamer clams present at that location. You actually permit residents to digging licenses. Out-of-town residents are not allowed in.
If they are double feet.
Oh, is that what it is?
Okay. So, any last comments from the board? All right, so let's wrap this up. First of all, I want to thank everyone that's been involved. Tom, thank you for coming here again and sitting through the meeting. Unfortunately, it's tedious work. We want to get it as best as we can right out of the block. And just know it's a dynamic document. It can change over the years, and we hope to take baby steps and figure out how it's going and adapt accordingly. So I want to thank both boards for doing all the participation in it and giving us advice.
Thank you, guys.
Everybody else.
Thanks for having us.
And thanks to the public for coming and being interested. The next steps will be, if you can get the document together with all the changes we discussed, get it over to us. And as Karen suggested, we'll have a meeting after town meeting to discuss what the actual pilot plan will look like. Hopefully it'll be we'll follow the guidelines that we did, and hopefully it'll just be size and structure and term, that type of thing, and not and location.
Mr. Chair, can I make a suggestion? Can you send it over with the red lines?
Sure.
I'd rather see where the changes were made, otherwise it's going to be pretty difficult to identify.
Okay, I can redline and then
version.
comment in the sections why.
Yeah,
That's,
Yeah.
if that works.
Do you want us involved in discussions about what you want to do for pilot?
Yeah, you guys will be here for that.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, you guys know it better than anybody, so I would say come and give your input and
That'll be
get that
next.
wrapped up in the meeting, yes, ma'am.
Well, I would also like the Shellfish Advisory to many of these points to give some thought, if there are members that are interested in the application, to think about when it is appropriate for you to step aside, because when we draft the criteria, I think it needs to be as arm's length as possible for public trust. That would be my recommendation. And if anyone is interested in applying for potentially vacant seats, they should think about it. It'll be a big responsibility, and you can't have a conflict.
And we need a recording secretary.
I see your hand. What would be the proper way to obtain soft cover hard copies of what's
Of the current.
going to be discussed, or changes in the plans, other than, say, general population relying on Facebook method of reading them?
So you'll post them?
So I can post what was here. I apologize, that's one version behind, but it's very close. I can post what was discussed here, but do you want me to send you the red line?
Come into our office, we can print one out.
Yeah, we can
And could
post.
we make a copy available at the library? Like
Yeah,
one
we
hard
can. It
copy?
was also available at town clerk's office too. I had printed a couple copies and left it with her as well, when the agenda was posted.
So when you post it, you might just be able to put, and hard copies are available
Yep,
for
I can do
inspection
that.
at the town hall and at the library, and then people know if they.
Okay,
hard
and I'm gonna post the actual document that was submitted today, not the red line version,
In a
right?
couple of days.
Okay, and I'll send you the red line version.
So
Okay.
start in a couple of days, close at 11:30 Friday.
All right, thank you all very much.
Thank you.
That's it?
So did you vote to approve?
Can we do regular rain?
Oh, wait, hold on.
Didn't you have to vote on something?
I don't think, it's not.
Or do you have to vote on this?
Yet, so I don't think we have to vote.
We gave you our corrections, we'll vote on the final.
Oh, at another meeting, or how does that, or, don't you? No?
Vote as amended, we haven't sure that
Red line.
But it should be a
So I'm at town meeting.
5 minutes.
that'll be just you did what we said.
Okay. Okay.
We'll vote the regs.
We're gonna direct the rain.
Good, Jim.
I got it.
We'll do that at the next meeting.
Your house.
Yeah, but after that.
I know.
Oh, yes, it is.
Go to the hallway.
Take it outside.
Let's go to the hallway.
Having fun, Steve?
Go home, but you can't stay here. Go out.
Good to see you.
Good work.
Join us, Rick.
Come back. Bye, Steve.
Harper.
Okay. My next discussion is to discuss vote on one-day wine and malt license. Have a motion.
Move that the Board of Selectmen approve a one-day wine and malt license to Ellen McKenzie for an event at Out of the Blue on 124 Front Street, November 1st, 2019, from 5 to 9 p.m.
Second?
Second.
Ms. Conley, further discussion?
I had a question about
I was going
this.
to say discussion, yeah.
Yeah. My question is that in the backup, it said that's for a bridal shower at a store on Front Street on the first Friday.
It's not a bridal shower, she just made a typo.
Oh, okay.
It is for First Friday.
It's first Friday.
Harbor at a store, yes.
Well, I appreciate them coming and asking permission.
Yes.
And Ellen is obviously a very qualified and responsible person, but before I was on the board, there was a problem of open containers on Front Street.
Right.
I'm not opposed to this, but I don't want to go down that slippery slope
We
again.
can give them a reminder with the license that the alcohol has to stay in the
Has to
premise.
stay
in the
You know,
premise.
Yeah.
Okay. I would.
What is the event?
But doesn't,
First Friday in the month.
This Friday.
Oh, it's not a, it's just a party?
No,
First
you
Friday.
not go to First Friday.
no, he knows what First Friday is, but we're trying to understand, I mean,
They want to serve alcohol to their customers that come in the store.
Right, so it's not an event, it's really just a First Friday.
It's a First Friday event.
oh, I don't.
And what do they
I don't
sell,
know if we should
clothes?
do that.
I feel
Well,
like,
we've told them in the past that they could not serve alcohol without a one-day license.
Right.
Don't
Which is
other places still do that?
no.
Right, I appreciate that they came
If you were
forward and asked.
having an art gallery opening, whatever, right? They serve wine and cheese, but they have to get a license, right?
You have to get
Yeah.
a one-day.
One day.
But I guess the slippery slope I see here is we have establishments in the harbor whose business it is to serve alcohol. So I just don't know, how many of these one-day licenses would we give for a First Friday? What if 10 stores came in and said they wanted to serve alcohol?
That would be up to you.
Right.
So, on the application, it says fashion show. Is it a fashion show?
Oh. Yeah, that's why I was like,
Ask Tony, he's going.
That's what the
I think they
application
are
says.
having something special that night. It is First Friday. And they'd like to serve wine to the people that come.
I think if we put in an amendment that says that clearly says they must keep it on premise, I'd be, I mean, they're both good, it's a good business and it's a good caterer, so I'm not that worried about the application, but.
I don't see it going too much further with all the other stores joining, but if it does, it's worth the conversation.
Further discussion? I have a second, somebody.
I seconded.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
I don't know if you make a motion by Ms. Curran, second by Ms. Conley.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All opposed?
Aye.
Laura's not going to First Friday.
I might be, but
She's not
I'm not going to go there to drink.
All right, 4-1 in favor. Ms. Kern was the opposing vote. Liaison reports.
Nothing, I have nothing to
More
say.
anything? Liaison?
No.
I went to the Rec Commission and they talked about Steverman Park, how they're trying to replace the hockey rink, which is a great cause. They talked about the JV baseball field and just the fees. They're going to come back with the fee schedule for the turf fields and the other grass fields for the organization.
Master, am I?
Oh, that's right, yeah.
Yeah. Planning Board hosted the second master plan community meeting, which I think almost all of us attended. So I won't have to tell you how that went. But the next one is November 12th at 6:30 at the Gates Middle School. It's a public meeting for comments, and the next topic is on community. I'm going to forget what it is. Look it up online, because I can't remember. But it's really important. There are two more left, and November 2nd's the next one.
More?
Two things, so that two meetings of one night, they're right next to one another. So the golf committee reviewed preliminary plans from the architect, and I think they'll be coming before us in a couple of weeks. There were 3 different scenarios, and I think you'll be happy to hear that. I think they chose the most conservative scenario to vent and come forward before us, and they did a nice job. And good news for them is their revenues are the highest they have been in, 10 years?
The best in at least 10 years.
In 10 years this quarter, so I just want to thank that golf committee. I think it really is, good weather too, but also a direct correlation to all the efforts that they've put forth. They've done a great job. And then, just lastly, quickly, the Affordable Housing Trust is working with the Planning Board to put together the Affordable Housing Production Plan, an RFP out for that, so that'll be coming in the next couple of months, too.
Okay, Don? Awesome. All right. Correspondences. I know we have,
Nope.
nope.
We can.
There's a fund, you want to, I'll do this one.
Why don't you do it, Mr. Chair?
There's a fundraiser for John Reedy, an evening of friendship and fun. It is this Friday night, from 7 to 11 at the Red Lion Inn. And it's a fundraiser to support the Reedy family. It'll be a good fun event, so go if you can. Any other correspondence?
That was it. I would like to note that if you can't go to the fundraiser, you can bid online for things to support this charity.
That's good to know.
Yeah, it is good to know, because there's good stuff, too.
Great.
Well, you have a ton of correspondence related to,
Oh, yeah, do we have to do that?
well, you just should maybe say you have a ton of correspondence related to the discussion that you just had.
Yeah, and
Yeah, but we
most
haven't
of
had
that
time to
came
read
in,
them.
yeah, we received a lot of
5 minutes.
correspondence today related to the Shellfish Advisory regulation proposal and the site at Briggs Harbor, all of which will be reviewed by the board in the coming week, but I'm not going to read it all because we just got it in, right?
Yeah.
But thank you very much for sending it.
Because a lot of people, you know,
Yeah, no, it's actually great stuff, but should I just say who sent them in, or?
I don't think you need to. Just-
Okay. It's all of this.
They're on file in the selectman's office.
Approval of minutes?
So moved?
Well, there's 2 sets of minutes.
Move to accept the minutes for October 1st and the 15th, 2019. Board of Selectmen's meetings.
Second.
Second by Ms. Conley. Further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye, it's unanimous. And lastly, we are going to adjourn and sign documents. But before I do that,
Gasp.
I have an announcement to make. It's Ruth's birthday.
Oh.
Happy birthday.
Tomorrow.
Wow.
Well,
In
it's
about an hour and 10
tomorrow.
minutes.
It's almost tomorrow.
Happy birthday, Ruth.
Happy birthday.
Right.
Our
We'll make
number
sure
one
you're not here
reporter,
on your birthday.
29 years old. Thank you for all you do.
Anytime.
Happy birthday. Can I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second? Second. By Ms. Conley. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye.